Ma'am, but I said, sit down. The sharp command slices through the air like a slap. Every head in first class turns toward the commotion. A black grandmother, poised and graceful, stands frozen beside her seat, her 9-year-old granddaughter clutching her hand tightly. A white flight attendant glares at them with contempt. You people can't just walk up here like you own the place. The little girl's lip trembles. The older woman, calm and dignified, simply says, I do own it. But before she can explain, the attendant snatches the boarding passes and tosses them aside. Sure you do. Now move before I call security. Gasps ripple across the cabin. No one yet knows who this woman truly is. The founder and CEO of the global airline they're flying on, traveling quietly with her granddaughter. And as the flight takes off, a humiliation is about to unfold that will expose prejudice, loyalty, and a child's courage in front of the entire world. This is the story of Eleanor Jackson and her granddaughter Zoe, and what happens next will shake an entire airline to its core. Welcome to Blacktail Stories. Every story we share is more than just drama. It's a reminder of strength, resilience, and justice. If you believe in celebrating Black excellence and standing against injustice and prejudice, hit that like and subscribe button right now. We would love to know where you are watching from and what time it is for you right now in the comments. It's a bright Tuesday morning at Kennedy International Airport in New York City. Terminal 5 buzzes with the familiar chaos of travelers rushing to catch flights, dragging suitcases, checking phones, grabbing last-minute coffee before boarding. At Gate 23, passengers are beginning to board Flight 923 to San Francisco. It's a full flight, every seat occupied, the kind of transcontinental route that airlines depend on for revenue. Among those waiting to board are Eleanor Jackson and her granddaughter Zoe. Eleanor Jackson is 71 years old, though she looks a decade younger. She stands at 5'6", with silver hair pulled back in an elegant bun, warm brown eyes that have seen both struggle and triumph, and a bearing that speaks of quiet confidence earned through decades of hard work. She's wearing a simple navy cardigan over a white blouse, comfortable pants, and sensible shoes. No designer labels. No flashy jewelry except for a modest gold watch and her late husband's wedding ring on a chain around her neck. To anyone looking at her, she's just another grandmother traveling with her granddaughter. But Eleanor Jackson is so much more than that. She is the founder and CEO of Horizon Airways, one of the fastest growing airlines in North America. Starting with a single leased aircraft 35 years ago, she built an empire that now operates 275 planes, serves 52 countries, and employs 18,000 people. She's a self-made billionaire who revolutionized affordable air travel, a woman who broke every glass ceiling in an industry dominated by white men, a legend in business circles who's been featured on the covers of Forbes, Time, and Fortune. Her net worth stands at $4.2 billion, but you'd never know it from her unassuming appearance today. But today, she's not wearing her CEO uniform. She's not in boardrooms or executive lounges. She's not making multi-million-dollar decisions or negotiating with manufacturers. Today, she's just Grandma Ellie, taking her 9-year-old granddaughter on her very first airplane ride. Eleanor does this regularly, travels incognito on her own airline, observing operations from a passenger's perspective, seeing what her employees do when they don't know the CEO is watching. It's how she keeps her finger on the pulse of the company, how she ensures that the values she built Horizon Airways on, accessibility, dignity, excellent service for everyone, regardless of ticket price, are actually being upheld. But today isn't about work. Today is about Zoe's first flight, about being present with her granddaughter, about creating memories. Zoe Jackson is a bundle of excited energy. She's 9 years old with dark curly hair pulled into 2 puffs, bright intelligent eyes, and a gap-toothed smile that lights up her entire face. She's wearing her favorite purple dress with sparkly leggings and light-up sneakers that flash with every step. Her small backpack is covered in patches of butterflies and rainbows, and she clutches a stuffed penguin named Captain that's been with her since she was 3. Zoe has been counting down the days to this trip for months. She's going to San Francisco to visit her parents, Marcus and Janelle Jackson, who manage Horizon Airways West Coast operations. But more than that, she's finally going to fly on an airplane, something she's dreamed about since she was old enough to look up at the sky and watch planes soar overhead. And she gets to do it with her grandmother, her hero, the woman who tells her stories about building airplanes and running companies and never, ever giving up on your dreams, no matter how many people tell you it's impossible. As they wait in the boarding line, Zoe bounces on her toes, barely able to contain her excitement. Grandma, do you think we'll go through the clouds? Can we see our house from the air? Will there be snacks? Are the seats really comfy? Eleanor smiles, her hand resting gently on Zoe's shoulder. Yes to all of those things. My dear, flying is magical. You're going to love it. I know I will because you built the planes. Grandma, you made them safe and good. A few passengers nearby glance over, charmed by the child's enthusiasm, though none of them make the connection between this simply dressed grandmother and the airline they're flying. Eleanor has chosen to travel this way intentionally. In Zoe's pocket is her mother's smartphone, given to her for emergency use only on this trip. She's promised to be responsible with it, and so far, she's kept her word, only taking it out twice to send quick texts to her parents. Look at Captain, Zoe whispers, holding up her stuffed penguin. He's nervous about flying. I told him it's okay because you made the plane super safe. Eleanor smiles, grateful for her granddaughter's unwavering faith in her. If only the world were as fair and straightforward as Zoe believes it to be. Airport tweet scene. The departure board shows flight 923 to San Francisco scheduled for an on-time departure. It's 8:37 a.m., and boarding will begin in exactly 23 minutes. Terminal 5 hums with pre-departure energy. The smell of coffee from nearby kiosks mingles with the antiseptic scent of cleaning products. Announcements echo through the space, calling passengers to various gates, reminding others not to leave bags unattended. The lighting is bright, bouncing off the polished floors, giving everything a slightly surreal quality. Eleanor guides Zoe to seats near their gate, setting down their single shared carry-on. They travel light. Eleanor has always preferred efficiency in all things, including packing. Can we get a snack? Grandma, Zoe asks, eyeing a pretzel stand. Eleanor checks her watch, the same modest timepiece she's worn for 20 years, a gift from her late husband James before his passing. Its value is sentimental rather than monetary, despite her billions. We have time. What would you like? They walk together to the pretzel stand, where Zoe orders with the confidence of someone much older. The cashier smiles at her enthusiasm. First flight, the young woman asks. Yes, and my grandma built the plane, Zoe announces proudly. The cashier looks confused but smiles politely. Well, that's special. Enjoy your flight. Eleanor simply nods, used to people not believing or understanding. It's actually preferable this way. Anonymity gives her honest insights. Back at the gate, the boarding area grows more crowded. Business travelers tap furiously on laptops, trying to send one last email before losing connectivity. A young couple argues quietly over their itinerary. An older man sleeps peacefully, his chin tucked to his chest, carry-on clutched between his feet. At 8:42 a.m., exactly 18 minutes until departure, the gate agent steps to the microphone. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. We are now ready to begin boarding Horizon Airways Flight 923 to San Francisco. At this time, we invite our first-class passengers, Horizon Elite members, and passengers needing special assistance to board through Lane 1. Zoe squeezes Eleanor's hand tightly. That's us. Grandma, we're first class. Eleanor nods, gathering their belongings. She had purchased first-class tickets because she wanted Zoe's first flight experience to be special, to be comfortable, to be everything a child's introduction to flying should be. They join the line, Zoe practically vibrating with excitement, her light-up shoes flashing with each bouncing step. They present their boarding passes to the gate agent, who scans them efficiently. Have a wonderful flight, he says, returning the documents. With that, they step onto the jet bridge, the first step of Zoe's adventure. The closed space amplifies Zoe's excited whispers, making other passengers smile indulgently. We're really doing it. Grandma, we're really flying. We really are, sweetheart. Eleanor feels a flutter of anticipation herself, though for different reasons. She always experiences this when boarding her airline incognito, the mixture of pride in what she's built and anxiety about whether her standards are truly being upheld. The jet bridge slopes gently downward toward the waiting aircraft. Through the small windows, Zoe catches glimpses of the tarmac, of ground crew moving purposefully around other planes, of the morning sun gleaming off metal surfaces. Look, Grandma, the wing is huge. It needs to be strong to carry us all the way to California. At the end of the jet bridge, they can see into the open door of the aircraft, the entrance to an adventure for Zoe, and perhaps, though Eleanor doesn't know it yet, the beginning of a different kind of journey for them both. First encounter with antagonist. The flight attendants are positioned near the door, greeting passengers as they board. There are 3 flight attendants visible: a young man named Michael Ramirez, who smiles warmly at every passenger, an older woman named Helen, who greets people with professional courtesy, and a woman in her mid-40s named Rebecca Whitfield, who stands near the first-class section with her arms crossed, her expression pinched and unwelcoming. Rebecca Whitfield has been with Horizon Airways for 16 years. She started when the airline was much smaller, and she's watched it grow with a mixture of pride and resentment. 3 times she's applied for senior cabin manager positions. 3 times she's been passed over, most recently losing the position to a younger Hispanic man with 8 fewer years of experience. Her personnel file contains 7 previous passenger complaints about her tone and attitude, all filed by passengers of color, all dismissed as customer misunderstandings by her former supervisor, who has since retired. What Rebecca doesn't know is that her file has been flagged in the new anti-bias monitoring system implemented by Eleanor Jackson 6 months earlier. One more substantiated complaint will trigger an automatic review. Michael greets Eleanor and Zoe with genuine warmth. "Good morning, welcome aboard. Heading somewhere fun." Zoe nods enthusiastically. "We're going to see my mommy and daddy in California, and this is my first time flying." Michael's face lights up. "Your first flight, that's so exciting." "Well, you're in for a treat. Flying is the best." Eleanor smiles at his kindness. "Thank you. We're looking forward to it." They move into the cabin, heading toward their seats in row 2. First class on this aircraft has been configured with large, comfortable seats, extra leg room, and premium amenities. Eleanor knows every detail of this plane because her company designed the interior layout, selected the seats, and chose the color schemes. But she doesn't say any of this. She's just a passenger today. Rebecca Whitfield watches them approach with barely concealed suspicion. Her eyes narrow as she takes in Eleanor's simple clothing. Zoe's excited bouncing. The modest carry-on they share. Something flickers across her face. Judgment, preconception, bias. Eleanor notices immediately. After decades in business, she's developed a sixth sense for detecting prejudice. It's a familiar feeling, one she's experienced countless times. From her earliest days trying to secure funding for her fledgling airline to boardroom battles with executives who couldn't accept a black woman as their equal. She recognizes it in Rebecca's expression, in the slight stiffening of her posture, in the way her customer service smile doesn't reach her eyes. As Eleanor and Zoe reach row 2, Rebecca steps forward, intercepting them before they can settle into their seats. "Excuse me," as she says, her voice sharp. "Can I see your boarding passes again?" Eleanor presents them calmly. Of course, Rebecca examines the documents with exaggerated scrutiny, flipping them over, holding them up to the light as if checking for counterfeits. Meanwhile, a white couple approaches, and Rebecca immediately smiles, warm and genuine. "Good morning, Mr. and Mrs. Robertson. So lovely to see you again. Your usual seats in 3A and 3B are all ready for you." The Robertsons, an older white couple, he in a golf shirt with an expensive watch, she in designer casual wear, smile appreciatively. "Thank you, Rebecca," Mrs. Robertson says. "Always a pleasure to have you on our flights." Rebecca beams before turning back to Eleanor and Zoe, her smile vanishing instantly. "These seats are for full-fare first-class passengers," she says, handing the boarding passes back with obvious reluctance. "Yes, I'm aware," Eleanor responds evenly. "That's why we purchased first-class tickets." Rebecca's eyebrows rise slightly. "You purchased these, they weren't upgrades or rewards tickets." "Full fare," Eleanor confirms, her voice betraying nothing of the indignity of being questioned. Rebecca's lips purse. "I see, well, yes. These are your seats, then?" Her tone makes it clear she finds this surprising and somewhat objectionable. Zoe, sensing the tension but not fully understanding it, clutches her penguin tighter. She looks up at Rebecca with innocent curiosity. Captain is excited for his first flight too, she says, holding up her stuffed animal. Rebecca barely glances at the child. Stuffed animals need to be properly stowed for takeoff and landing, she says curtly, before turning to greet the next passengers, a white businessman in an expensive suit, with renewed warmth. Welcome aboard, sir. May I take your jacket? As Eleanor helps Zoe settle into the window seat, she squeezes her granddaughter's hand reassuringly. It's okay, sweetheart. Captain can sit with you until we take off. Then he'll have a little nap in your backpack. Zoe nods, but her earlier exuberance has dimmed slightly. Even at 9, she's perceptive enough to recognize when someone is being unkind. At 8:47 a.m., exactly 13 minutes until departure, Eleanor glances at her watch. The flight is filling up quickly. From her seat, she can observe Rebecca's interactions with other passengers. The pattern is unmistakable: warm, solicitous attention to white passengers in first class, perfunctory, often cold treatment to the few passengers of color. Eleanor has seen this before. It's one of the reasons she instituted mystery shopper programs and anonymous audits of customer service. But experiencing it personally, with her granddaughter watching, feels different, more immediate, more troubling. Still, she remains calm. This is not the first time she's been underestimated or dismissed based on her appearance. It certainly won't be the last. But as Horizon's CEO, she has a unique opportunity to observe and later address this behavior from the inside. For now, though, she is simply Zoe's grandmother, focused on making this first flight a magical experience despite Rebecca Whitfield's apparent determination to dampen their spirits. Boarding confrontation. As the final first-class passengers settle into their seats, Eleanor opens their shared carry-on to retrieve a book for Zoe. The bag is placed in the aisle temporarily while she helps Zoe get comfortable. Rebecca Whitfield returns, moving through the cabin with deliberate authority. She stops abruptly when she sees Eleanor's bag partially blocking the aisle. Ma'am, she says sharply. Sit down. The command slices through the air like a slap. Every head in first class turns toward the commotion. Eleanor stands frozen beside her seat, Zoe clutching her hand tightly. Your bag is blocking the aisle, Rebecca continues, her voice dripping with contempt. You people can't just walk up here like you own the place. Zoe's lip trembles slightly. The phrase "you people" hangs in the air, its implication unmistakable. Eleanor remains calm and dignified, simply saying, I do own it. Her words carry a double meaning that only she understands. She literally owns the airline, but she's also claiming her right to exist in this space without harassment. But before she can explain or move the bag, Rebecca snatches their boarding passes from the seatback pocket where Eleanor had placed them and tosses them aside with deliberate disrespect. Sure you do, she says with cutting sarcasm. Now move before I call security. The boarding passes flutter to the floor of the aircraft. The sudden quiet that follows is heavy with tension. Several passengers shift uncomfortably in their seats. Others pretend not to notice, suddenly fascinated by their phones or the safety cards in their seatbacks. Have you ever been publicly humiliated while possessing the power to change everything with a single sentence? The question floats in Eleanor's mind as she looks at Rebecca's contemptuous expression. She could end this instantly. One sentence identifying herself would transform this encounter completely. But what would that teach Zoe about handling injustice? What would it reveal about how her airline really operates when the CEO isn't watching? I apologize for the bag, Eleanor says with dignity, reaching down to retrieve their boarding passes from the floor. I was helping my granddaughter get settled. Rebecca blocks her movement, standing squarely in the aisle. I'll need to verify these are actually your seats, she says loudly enough for nearby passengers to hear. We've had problems with people trying to sit in seats they haven't paid for. It's 8:49 a.m., 11 minutes until departure. The rest of the plane continues boarding, creating a growing audience for this confrontation. Economy passengers file past, some slowing to observe the tension in first class. Eleanor remains standing, her expression composed despite the public humiliation. Our boarding passes were just scanned at the gate. They're valid. Rebecca's lips curl in a dismissive smile. Well, mistakes happen, especially with certain passengers. The implication hangs in the air. An older white woman in 4C nods in apparent agreement with Rebecca. A middle-aged Hispanic man in 1D looks uncomfortable, glancing between Eleanor and the flight attendant with growing concern. From her window seat, Zoe watches with wide eyes, her earlier excitement now replaced with confusion and distress. She hugs Captain the Penguin tightly against her chest. "Grandma," she says quietly, "what's happening?" "Everything's fine, sweetheart." Eleanor reassures her, though her eyes never leave Rebecca's face. "There's just a misunderstanding about our seats," Rebecca snorts. "No misunderstanding. I just need to make sure you're in the right section of the plane." A young white woman in her late 20s, seated across the aisle in 2C, begins discreetly recording the interaction on her phone. Her name tag identifies her as Morgan Taylor, a pharmaceutical sales representative returning from a conference. "Excuse me, she says to Rebecca. "Is there a problem? These passengers were clearly assigned these seats." Rebecca turns her sharp gaze to Morgan. "This doesn't concern you, ma'am. I'm handling a security issue." "Security issue," Eleanor repeats calmly. "My granddaughter and I presented valid boarding passes and were seated by the gate agent. What security concern could possibly exist?" Rebecca leans closer, her voice lower but still audible to nearby passengers. "Listen, I've worked this route for 16 years. I know who belongs in first class and who doesn't. So either show me additional ID proving you paid for these seats, or I'll have the captain remove you before we depart." The threat hangs in the air. It's 8:52 a.m., 8 minutes until scheduled departure. The confrontation is creating a minor delay in the boarding process. With passengers backing up in the aisle behind Rebecca, Eleanor meets Rebecca's gaze steadily. Decades of business negotiations, of facing down skeptical investors and hostile competitors, have prepared her for moments like this. She reaches into her purse and produces her driver's license. "Will this satisfy your concerns?" she asks, her voice level but with an undercurrent of steel. Rebecca takes the ID, examining it with exaggerated scrutiny. "Eleanor Jackson," she reads aloud, her tone suggesting suspicion about the name itself. From further back in the boarding line, Rafael Mendez, a 42-year-old Hispanic businessman and Horizon Airways frequent flyer, recognizes the name immediately. His eyes widen in surprise as he looks more carefully at Eleanor. "Could it actually be?" Rebecca hands the license back with obvious reluctance. "Fine. But any disruption during this flight will result in immediate action. The only disruption thus far has been your questioning of our valid boarding passes," Eleanor points out calmly. Rebecca's face flushes with anger. She leans in closer, her voice a harsh whisper. "You should be grateful you're even allowed on this plane. Don't push your luck." With that, she turns and moves back toward the front of the aircraft, leaving Eleanor standing in the aisle, their boarding passes still scattered on the floor. As Eleanor bends to retrieve them, Zoe's small voice comes from the window seat. "Grandma, why is she being so mean to us?" Eleanor carefully picks up their documents, takes her seat beside Zoe, and puts her arm around her granddaughter's shoulders. "Sometimes, sweetheart, people make judgments based on what they see rather than who someone truly is. It's not right, but it happens." "Because we're black?" Zoe asks with the direct clarity of a child. Eleanor pauses, considering how to respond to such a complex question. "Yes," she finally says, honesty winning out over protection. "Some people still judge others by the color of their skin rather than the content of their character." Zoe frowns, processing this information. "But that's not fair." "No, it's not," Eleanor agrees. "And that's why it's so important to stand up for what's right, even when it's difficult." Zoe nods solemnly, then glances toward the front of the plane where Rebecca is now greeting a white family with exaggerated warmth. "You could tell her who you are," Zoe suggests. "That you own the whole airline." Eleanor smiles gently. "I could, but sometimes it's more important to see how people behave when they don't know who you are. It shows their true character." It's a lesson Eleanor hopes her granddaughter will understand someday. That true dignity comes from within, not from external validation or recognition. But it's a difficult lesson to teach, especially when it comes at the cost of public humiliation. As the final passengers board, Eleanor notices that several people are now watching their row with increased interest, perhaps sensing that something significant has just occurred. The stage is set for what will unfold over the next several hours at 35,000 feet. Passenger reactions. The aftermath of the confrontation ripples through the first-class cabin like a stone dropped in still water. Passengers react in varying ways to what they've just witnessed. Morgan Taylor, the young white woman in 2C who began recording, continues to do so discreetly, her phone partially hidden by her open laptop. She catches Eleanor's eye and offers a small, sympathetic smile. Eleanor nods almost imperceptibly in acknowledgement. Across the aisle, the Robertsons whisper to each other, occasionally glancing toward Eleanor and Zoe with expressions that range from suspicion to approval. "She was right to check," Mrs. Robertson murmurs to her husband. "You never know these days." Mr. Robertson nods. "First class isn't what it used to be since they started offering those discount upgrades." Their voices are low, but in the confined space of the cabin, their words carry farther than they realize. Eleanor hears them clearly but gives no indication, focusing instead on helping Zoe get comfortable. In seat 1D, Rafael Mendez, the Hispanic businessman who recognized Eleanor's name, seems increasingly uncomfortable with the situation. He keeps glancing toward Eleanor with an expression of dawning recognition, then looking away quickly when she might notice. He types something rapidly on his phone, then stows it as the departure time approaches. 2 rows behind Eleanor, a young white couple exchange troubled glances. The woman leans toward her partner and whispers, "That was really uncomfortable to watch. Should we say something?" The man shakes his head slightly. "Not our business. Besides, we don't have all the facts." This passive response is precisely what Eleanor has observed throughout her career, the bystander effect that allows discrimination to continue unchecked. It's why she's implemented anonymous reporting systems within Horizon Airways, why she's created channels for passengers and employees to speak up without fear of repercussion. In seat 5A, a middle-aged white woman named Linda Matthews has been watching the entire exchange with growing discomfort. She's a kindergarten teacher from Portland, traveling to visit her daughter in San Francisco. The treatment of Eleanor and Zoe bothers her deeply, but she struggles with how to respond. Should she speak up? Would that make things worse? As a white woman, what is her responsibility in this moment? Meanwhile, Rebecca Whitfield moves through the cabin with renewed authority, seemingly energized by the confrontation. She makes a show of checking the first-class amenities, ensuring that each passenger has what they need. Each passenger except Eleanor and Zoe, whom she pointedly ignores. It's 8:52 a.m., 8 minutes until departure. The final economy passengers file past first class to their seats. Several notice the tense atmosphere in the premium cabin, the way Rebecca fawns over certain passengers while completely overlooking others. One of these observers is James Wilson, a black flight attendant assigned to the economy section. He catches the tail end of the interaction and recognizes the pattern immediately. His expression darkens briefly before he composes himself and continues with his duties. He makes a mental note to check on the grandmother and child later if possible. Morgan Taylor, still recording discreetly, captures Rebecca's continued pattern of selective service. She looks troubled by what she's witnessing, but uncertain how to intervene without escalating the situation. The cabin settles into an uneasy quiet as the boarding process completes. Eleanor helps Zoe buckle her seatbelt, whispering reassurances and pointing out interesting features of the aircraft to rekindle her excitement. "See that wing design?" she says softly. "I worked with engineers for months to get that shape just right. It helps save fuel while keeping the ride smooth." Zoe's eyes widen with interest, temporarily distracted from the unpleasantness. "You designed that." "Grandma, my team and I did," Eleanor confirms with a smile. "Everything on this plane was carefully planned, from the shape of the windows to the material in these seats." A few feet away, Mr. Robertson overhears this exchange and scoffs quietly to his wife. "Listen to that. Now she's claiming to be an aircraft designer." Mrs. Robertson shakes her head. Some people will say anything for attention. Again, their voices carry just far enough for Eleanor to hear, but she maintains her composure, focusing entirely on her granddaughter. After decades in business, she's developed a thick skin for such dismissals. What concerns her more is the effect on Zoe, who is experiencing this kind of treatment, perhaps for the first time in such a direct way. From the front of the cabin, Rebecca watches with narrowed eyes. Something about Eleanor's quiet confidence bothers her deeply. A woman who should be intimidated by her authority is instead completely unruffled. It's 8:54 a.m., 6 minutes until departure. The captain's voice comes over the intercom, welcoming passengers to Horizon Airways Flight 923 to San Francisco. He announces an on-time departure and good weather conditions for the journey. As he speaks, Morgan Taylor makes a decision. She puts away her phone temporarily and signals to Michael Ramirez, the younger male flight attendant, who approaches with a questioning look. "Is everything okay, ma'am?" he asks quietly. Morgan glances toward Eleanor and Zoe, then back to Michael. "I'm concerned about how your colleague is treating those passengers," she says, keeping her voice low. "It seems inappropriate and possibly discriminatory." Michael's expression reveals nothing, though a slight tension appears around his eyes. "I appreciate your concern," he says professionally. "Is there something specific I can help you with?" Morgan realizes he's being careful, potentially concerned about crossing a senior colleague. "Just maybe check on them when you can," she suggests. "Make sure they're okay." Michael nods almost imperceptibly. "Of course, we want all our passengers to have a comfortable journey." As he moves away, Morgan notices Rafael Mendez watching their interaction with interest. Their eyes meet briefly, a moment of silent communication between two passengers increasingly uncomfortable with what they're witnessing. It's 8:56 a.m., 4 minutes until departure. The final preparations for takeoff begin. The gate agent collects the jetway and closes the aircraft door. The sense of being sealed in together, of sharing this confined space for the next 6 hours, intensifies the tension in the first-class cabin. Eleanor maintains her dignified calm, helping Zoe stow her Penguin for takeoff while pointing out interesting features of the aircraft to distract her. But she's acutely aware of the watching eyes, the whispered comments, the subtle and not-so-subtle judgments being made about their presence in first class. This is the reality she's worked her entire career to change, not just within her airline but within society itself. The irony that it's happening on her own aircraft, under her own brand, is not lost on her. But rather than anger, she feels a renewed sense of purpose. This incident, uncomfortable as it is, will ultimately serve a greater good. It will reveal where her company's values are being upheld and where they're falling short. As the flight attendants prepare for the safety demonstration, Eleanor catches Zoe watching Rebecca with wary eyes. She squeezes her granddaughter's hand reassuringly. "Remember what I've always told you," she says softly. "Your worth isn't determined by how others treat you, but by how you respond to that treatment." Zoe nods, but her earlier excitement about flying has been dampened by the tension surrounding them. Eleanor makes a silent promise that by the time they land in San Francisco, her granddaughter will have learned a more powerful lesson about justice and dignity than any she could have planned. Zoe's decision to record. As the safety demonstration begins, Zoe watches with the fascination of a child experiencing something for the first time. Her eyes widen as Michael demonstrates how to use the oxygen masks, and she mimics fastening an imaginary seatbelt when instructed. For a moment, the magic of her first flight overcomes the unpleasantness of their reception. But that moment is short-lived. When Rebecca moves through the cabin checking seatbelts before takeoff, she pointedly skips over Eleanor and Zoe. Moving from row 1 directly to row 3, the slight is obvious, drawing raised eyebrows from several passengers. Michael, noticing the omission, quickly approaches their row. "May I check your seatbelts, please?" he asked kindly. "Of course." Eleanor responds with a grateful smile. He ensures they are properly secured, then leans down slightly toward Zoe. "First flight, right, the takeoff is the best part. When you feel the plane lifting off the ground, there's nothing else like it." Zoe's smile returns, brightening her face. "I can't wait." As Michael moves on, Zoe notices Rebecca watching their interaction with obvious disapproval. The flight attendant's expression shifts from professional mask to naked dislike when her gaze falls on them, then back to pleasant efficiency when addressing white passengers. Even at 9, Zoe recognizes the pattern. She's had the benefit of parents and grandparents who've prepared her for the reality of racial bias without letting it define her self-worth. Still, experiencing it so directly feels different from the abstract discussions in her family's living room. The engines roar to life, vibrating through the aircraft. Zoe bounces slightly in her seat with excitement, momentarily distracted by the new sensation. She reaches for Eleanor's hand as the plane begins to taxi. "We're moving." "Grandma," Eleanor squeezes her hand. "We are indeed. Watch out the window. You'll see all the other planes as we taxi to the runway." As Zoe presses her face to the window, Eleanor notices Rebecca in the galley, watching them with that same contemptuous expression. She's talking to Helen, the other female flight attendant, gesturing subtly in their direction. Helen looks uncomfortable but doesn't contradict whatever Rebecca is saying. It's 9:03 a.m., and the plane is approaching the runway. The captain announces they are next for takeoff and asks flight attendants to take their seats. Rebecca passes through first class one more time, offering mints to white passengers while deliberately skipping Eleanor and Zoe. The slight is so obvious that Morgan Taylor, across the aisle, holds out her own mints toward them. "Would you like one?" she offers quietly. "Thank you," Eleanor says, accepting the gesture of solidarity. As the plane turns onto the runway, Zoe's attention is split between the window and the cabin dynamics. Though young, she's remarkably perceptive, a quality Eleanor recognized early and has always encouraged. Zoe observes how differently Rebecca treats them compared to other passengers, notices the whispers, the glances, the subtle and not so subtle expressions of bias. She remembers a lesson from her school just 2 weeks ago. Ms. Peterson, her social studies teacher, had taught them about Rosa Parks, about standing up against unfairness, about the importance of documenting injustice. "When something isn't right," Ms. Peterson had said, "the truth is your strongest ally." The plane accelerates down the runway, pressing Zoe back into her seat. Her eyes widen at the new sensation, and for a moment she's purely a child experiencing the wonder of flight for the first time. The ground blurs outside her window, and then suddenly, the pressure shifts in their rear. Airborne. "We're flying, and Grandma," she exclaims, momentarily forgetting everything else. Eleanor smiles, watching her granddaughter experience the miracle that has defined her professional life. "We certainly are." The plane climbs steeply, the engines at full power. Zoe watches, mesmerized, as the ground falls away, as buildings become tiny models, as the vastness of New York City spreads out beneath them. As they pass through 10,000 feet, the seatbelt sign dings off. Rebecca immediately begins preparing the first-class cabin for beverage service, her attention focused exclusively on passengers in rows 1, 3, 4, and 5. It's this deliberate exclusion that cements Zoe's decision. With a seriousness beyond her years, she reaches into her pocket and discreetly removes her mother's smartphone. Eleanor notices but says nothing, curious about her granddaughter's intentions. With the skill of a digital native, Zoe unlocks the phone, opens the camera app, and switches it to video mode. She positions it carefully on her tray table, partially obscured by her stuffed penguin, but with a clear view of the aisle and Rebecca's movements. "What are you doing, sweetheart?" Eleanor asks quietly. Zoe meets her grandmother's eyes with unexpected maturity. "Ms. Peterson taught us that when people aren't being fair, we should document it, like how Rosa Parks' arrest was photographed, and those pictures help people understand what was happening." Eleanor feels a swell of pride mixed with concern. Her granddaughter understands at 9 what many adults never grasp, that accountability often requires evidence, that injustice thrives in shadows but withers under documentation. "Are you sure?" Eleanor asks, not discouraging her, but ensuring she understands the significance of her action. Zoe nods solemnly. "She's being mean to you, Grandma, and it's not right. People should know." Eleanor considers the implications. As CEO, she could simply report Rebecca's behavior through official channels. But would that capture the lived experience of discrimination? Would it reveal the subtle patterns of bias that many passengers of color endure silently? "All right," she says finally. "Just be discreet and respectful." Zoe nods, adjusting the phone's position as Rebecca approaches row 3 with the beverage cart, offering champagne and orange juice with a warm smile to the Robertsons. The contrast between her treatment of white passengers and her deliberate oversight of Eleanor and Zoe continues, now being captured in high definition. It's 9:12 a.m., and as the plane levels off at cruising altitude, an unexpected documentation of discrimination is underway, initiated not by the powerful CEO, but by her 9-year-old granddaughter, armed with nothing more than a smartphone and an innate sense of justice. Escalation of mistreatment. The first hour of the flight reveals a clear pattern of differential treatment. Rebecca moves through the cabin with practiced efficiency, offering warm service to white passengers while providing only the bare minimum, if anything at all, to Eleanor and Zoe. When the beverage cart finally reaches their row, Rebecca addresses them without making eye contact. "Drink," she asks curtly, a stark contrast to her animated conversations with other passengers. "Orange juice for my granddaughter, please," Eleanor responds evenly. "And coffee for me, if possible." Rebecca pours the orange juice with visible reluctance, placing it on Zoe's tray table without a word. She then reaches for a coffee cup but accidentally knocks it over, spilling nothing but making a show of the inconvenience. "We're out of coffee cups," she announces. "You'll have to wait." "I'm happy to use a water cup," Eleanor offers reasonably. Rebecca ignores the suggestion entirely. "Anything else?" she asks, clearly hoping the answer is no. "Some napkins would be lovely," Eleanor says pleasantly. Rebecca tosses 2 cocktail napkins onto Eleanor's tray table and moves on quickly to row 3, where her demeanor transforms instantly. "Mr. and Miss Robertson, more champagne, and we have those warm cookies you enjoy. I set some aside specially for you." Zoe's phone, still discreetly recording, captures this stark contrast in service. The little girl's eyes meet Eleanor's, silently acknowledging what they're both witnessing. Across the aisle, Morgan Taylor has noticed the pattern as well. Her own recording continues intermittently, capturing key moments of the increasingly obvious discrimination. It's 9:47 a.m., and the service disparity is becoming impossible to ignore. While other first-class passengers have received warm towels, beverage refills, and offers of blankets or pillows, Eleanor and Zoe sit with their single drinks, no offer of snacks, no check-ins about their comfort. "Grandma," Zoe whispers, "I'm hungry. They gave everyone else those fancy nuts." Eleanor presses the call button above their seats. Minutes pass with no response, though Rebecca is visible in the galley, chatting with Helen. Finally, Michael notices the illuminated button and approaches their row. "I'm sorry for the wait," he says. "How can I help you?" "My granddaughter would like some of the nuts that were distributed," Eleanor explains. "We seem to have been overlooked." Michael's expression flickers with understanding. "Of course. I'll bring those right away. Can I refresh your drinks as well?" "That would be wonderful, thank you." As Michael moves toward the galley, Rebecca intercepts him. Their conversation is just audible from Eleanor's seat. "What are they asking for now?" Rebecca demands. "Just the nuts and a drink refill." Michael responds. "They were missed during service." "They weren't missed," Rebecca corrects him sharply. "They didn't get any because we're running low. First-class regulars get priority." Michael hesitates, visibly uncomfortable. "I think we have plenty," he says carefully, "and all first-class passengers should receive the same service regardless." "I'm senior crew on this flight," Rebecca cuts him off. "I decide service distribution when supplies are limited." Michael stands his ground with quiet professionalism. "I believe Miss Jackson and her granddaughter deserve the same service as other passengers." The mention of Eleanor's last name causes Rebecca to glance sharply toward row 2. "What did you call her, Ms. Jackson?" Michael repeats. "That's the name on their boarding passes." When something flickers across Rebecca's face, a momentary hesitation, quickly replaced by renewed determination. "Just handle the economy cabin, Michael. I'll manage first class my way." She pushes past him, approaching Eleanor and Zoe with a tight smile that doesn't reach her eyes. "I understand you're requesting nuts," she says, her voice carrying an undercurrent of irritation. "Yes, please," Eleanor responds pleasantly. "My granddaughter is quite hungry." "We're rationing first-class amenities on this flight," Rebecca announces loudly enough for nearby passengers to hear. "Regular customers receive priority." From across the aisle, Morgan Taylor interrupts. "Excuse me, but I've flown this route dozens of times, and I've never heard of rationing snacks in first class." Rebecca's face hardens. "As I said, this is a special circumstance." "What special circumstance?" Morgan presses. "That's confidential operational information." Rebecca responds stiffly. Mr. Robertson leans forward from row 3. Now, let's not make a fuss. I'm sure the attendant knows what she's doing." "Thank you, sir," Rebecca says with evident relief. "Some passengers understand how airlines operate." The implication is clear. Eleanor doesn't belong in this space, doesn't understand the unspoken rules, doesn't merit the same consideration as regular passengers. It's 9:57 a.m., 3 minutes until Rebecca will make another crucial error in judgment. She returns to the galley, retrieves a single small packet of nuts, and drops it unceremoniously onto Zoe's tray table. "One serving," she says curtly. "We can't accommodate requests for extras." No one has requested extras. The stated policy in Horizon Airways service manual was a document Eleanor personally approved, specifies that first-class passengers receive unlimited complimentary snacks upon request, inventory permitting. Zoe looks up at Rebecca with genuine confusion. "But Mr. Robertson got 2 bags, she says innocently, pointing toward row 3 where indeed 2 empty nut packets are visible on his tray table. Rebecca's expression darkens. "Are you calling me a liar, young lady?" The question hangs in the air, its inappropriateness stunning even those passengers who had been sympathetic to Rebecca earlier. To accuse a child of calling an adult a liar for making a simple factual observation crosses a line that even the Robertsons find uncomfortable. Eleanor's voice, when she speaks, carries the quiet authority that has guided her through decades of business negotiations. "My granddaughter made an observation, not an accusation. She's 9 years old and deserves to be spoken to respectfully, as does every passenger on this aircraft." Rebecca leans closer, lowering her voice but still audible to nearby passengers. "Listen, I don't know how you got these seats, but first class on Horizon Airways has certain standards. Standards that clearly," she gives Eleanor's simple clothing a dismissive once-over, "aren't being met today." It's 10 o'clock a.m. exactly, and Rebecca has just made the professional mistake of her career. Her words, captured on Zoe's phone and Morgan's as well, directly violate Horizon Airways' non-discrimination policy, a document that begins with Eleanor Jackson's personal statement about dignity and respect being non-negotiable values for the company. Eleanor meets Rebecca's gaze steadily, neither intimidated nor provoked into an unprofessional response. "I'm very familiar with Horizon Airways' standards," she says simply, "both in terms of service and conduct." Something in her tone gives Rebecca pause. For a moment, doubt flickers across her face, but rather than reconsidering her approach, she doubles down. "Well, you might think you know," she says dismissively, "but those of us who work here understand how things really operate." With that, she turns and walks away, leaving Eleanor and Zoe with a single packet of nuts and the unrefreshed drinks they'd requested nearly 15 minutes earlier. Rafael Mendez, who has been watching the escalating situation with growing concern, catches Michael's eye and gestures him over. "Is there a reason those passengers are being treated differently?" he asks quietly. Michael hesitates, clearly torn between professional loyalty and personal ethics. "I can't comment on another crew member's service decisions," he says carefully. "I understand." Rafael nods. "But perhaps you could bring them some additional snacks. I'm happy to share mine." "I'll take care of it," Michael assures him, a look of resolution crossing his face. Minutes later, he approaches Eleanor and Zoe with a tray containing fresh drinks, multiple snack options, and warm towels. "With our compliments," he says professionally but with a meaningful glance that communicates his awareness of the situation. "Please let me know if there's anything else I can provide for you during the flight." From the galley, Rebecca watches this interaction with barely concealed anger. What should have been a routine flight is becoming increasingly complicated. With passengers taking sides and her own colleague undermining her authority, she's too far away to hear Eleanor's quiet words to her granddaughter. "You see, Zoe, one person choosing kindness can make all the difference, even when others choose the opposite." Zoe nods, absorbing this lesson while her phone continues to record every moment of what will soon become one of the most significant customer service incidents in Horizon Airways' history: pre-flight service discrimination. As the flight progresses into its second hour, the pattern of discriminatory treatment becomes increasingly blatant. Rebecca's service approach has evolved from subtle exclusion to obvious avoidance of Eleanor and Zoe's row. The in-flight meal service begins at 10:30 a.m. First-class passengers on transcontinental flights should receive hot meals served on actual china with metal cutlery, one of Eleanor's innovations when she redesigned the Horizon Airways experience years ago. Rebecca moves through the cabin with practiced efficiency, laying white tablecloths for each first-class passenger, providing hot towels, and describing the meal options in detail. Each passenger receives the same careful script. "Today we're offering herb-crusted salmon with quinoa or beef tenderloin with roasted vegetables. Both are served with a seasonal salad and freshly baked bread. This script is delivered warmly to rows 1, 3, 4, and 5. When Rebecca reaches row 2, however, she places the tablecloths down with obvious reluctance and offers no explanation of the menu. Chicken or beef? She asks curtly. Eleanor raises an eyebrow slightly. I believe the options are salmon or beef tenderloin, she corrects gently. Could you please describe them for us? Rebecca's expression tightens. As I said, chicken or beef. Eleanor maintains her composure. In that case, my granddaughter would like the beef, please. I'll have the salmon. Rebecca makes no acknowledgement, simply writing something on her service pad before moving to row 3, where she resumes her detailed description of the meal options, now including information about the chef who designed the menu and the wine pairings available. The contrast is so stark that even Mrs. Robertson, who had been visibly sympathetic to Rebecca earlier, looks uncomfortable. She glances toward Eleanor with an expression that might be the beginning of understanding. When the meals arrive, the disparity continues. While other passengers receive artfully arranged plates with proper garnishes, Eleanor and Zoe are presented with hastily assembled trays. Eleanor's salmon appears to be the chicken option Rebecca had incorrectly described, and Zoe's beef is overcooked to the point of being difficult to cut. Neither Eleanor nor Zoe complain. Eleanor quietly helps her granddaughter cut the tough meat, maintaining her dignified calm despite the obvious slight. Across the aisle, Morgan Taylor has documented the entire service sequence. She catches Eleanor's eye and mouths, "I'm sorry," with genuine empathy. Eleanor responds with a small nod of acknowledgement. 2 rows behind them, Linda Matthews, the kindergarten teacher, has been watching with growing discomfort. Finally, she makes a decision. She signals to Michael, who approaches her row. Is there a way to report an employee's behavior? She asks quietly. What I'm seeing happening to that grandmother and child isn't right. Michael glances quickly toward the galley where Rebecca is preparing dessert trays. There's a customer feedback form available through the in-flight entertainment system, he explains. All reports are reviewed by customer service management. Linda nods. Thank you. I'll be filling that out today. It's 11:05 a.m., and Rebecca's behavior has now prompted at least 3 passengers to document or report her actions. In the galley, Helen approaches her colleague with concern. Rebecca, I think you might want to ease up a bit, she suggests carefully. People are noticing how you're treating those passengers in row 2. Rebecca dismisses her concern with a wave. I'm just maintaining standards. First class isn't for everyone. You know, some people need to learn that. Helen looks troubled but doesn't press the issue. Instead, she begins preparing extra dessert options, quietly planning to ensure Eleanor and Zoe receive proper service when the time comes. Meanwhile, Zoe continues recording discreetly. Her phone's memory is filling with damning evidence of discriminatory treatment, evidence that will soon make its way to Horizon Airways' executive team through channels Rebecca cannot possibly anticipate. At 11:15 a.m., the call button above row 2 illuminates again. Rebecca visibly sighs before deliberately turning her back, continuing to arrange dessert bar options for other passengers. After 3 minutes of being ignored, Eleanor presses the button again. This time, Helen notices and approaches their row. How can I help you? She asks with professional courtesy. My granddaughter would like to use the restroom. Eleanor explains. I wanted to check if it was available before she got up. Of course, Helen responds. The forward lavatory is open now. Would you like me to show her the way? That's very kind, but I'll accompany her, Eleanor says, unbuckling her seatbelt. As they stand to move toward the front of the aircraft, Rebecca emerges from the galley, blocking their path. The forward lavatory is for first-class passengers only, she states firmly. Eleanor meets her gaze calmly. We are first-class passengers, she reminds her. Rebecca's eyes narrow. Right, of course you are. Her tone makes it clear she still doesn't believe they belong there despite all evidence to the contrary. She steps aside with obvious reluctance, watching as Eleanor guides Zoe toward the lavatory. As they pass, Zoe drops her phone, which slides across the floor, coming to rest near Rebecca's feet. Eleanor's heart skips a beat as Rebecca picks up the device. The screen is still active, showing the video recording in progress. For a moment, time seems to stand still as Rebecca stares at the screen, comprehension dawning on her face. You've been recording me, she asks incredulously, her voice rising with indignation. Zoe looks to her grandmother, uncertain how to respond to being caught. Eleanor steps forward, her calm demeanor unchanged despite this new tension. My granddaughter was documenting her first flight experience, she explained smoothly. May we have her phone back? Please. Rebecca clutches the device tightly. Recording crew members without consent is against airline policy. I'll be holding on to this for now. It's a bluff, and Eleanor knows it. Horizon Airways has no such policy. In fact, the company's transparency guidelines explicitly state that passengers may record their experiences as long as they don't interfere with crew duties or compromise safety. I don't believe that's accurate, Eleanor states firmly. Please return my granddaughter's property immediately. Their standoff has drawn the attention of nearby passengers. Morgan Taylor has begun recording again, capturing this new confrontation. Rafael Mendez watches intently, his expression concerned. Michael approaches quickly, sensing the escalating tension. Is everything all right here? Rebecca turns to him, holding up the phone triumphantly. They've been secretly recording me. That's a violation of privacy and possibly federal regulations. Michael hesitates, clearly caught off guard by this development. Before he can respond, Eleanor speaks with quiet authority. There is no federal regulation or Horizon Airways policy prohibiting passengers from documenting their flight experience. She states with absolute certainty. My granddaughter's phone contains her personal property and should be returned to her immediately. The confidence with which she cites company policy gives Michael pause. He looks between Rebecca and Eleanor, clearly trying to determine the correct course of action. I think, he says carefully, the best approach would be to return the passenger's property and discuss any concerns with the captain. Rebecca's face flushes with anger. Are you undermining me in front of passengers? I'm the senior crew member here. I'm suggesting a solution that respects everyone's rights. Michael responds evenly. It's 11:23 a.m., and the confrontation has reached a critical point. Rebecca must decide whether to escalate further or back down. She chooses the former. Fine, she says tersely, handing the phone to Michael rather than returning it directly to Zoe. But I want it noted that I object to being recorded without consent, and I'll be filing a formal complaint when we land. Michael returns the phone to Zoe with an apologetic smile. Here you go. The lavatory is free now if you still need it. As Eleanor and Zoe continue to the restroom, Rebecca returns to the galley, her movements stiff with barely contained fury. She doesn't realize that her handling of this situation has been captured by multiple recording devices, creating a comprehensive record of her behavior that will soon reach the highest levels of Horizon Airways management. It's a turning point in the flight, the moment when Rebecca's treatment of Eleanor and Zoe transforms from troubling service disparity to documented misconduct that cannot be explained away as a misunderstanding or miscommunication. And all because a 9-year-old girl decided to document injustice, following the simple wisdom of her school teacher when something isn't right. The truth is your strongest ally. Mid-flight incidents. As the flight approaches its midpoint, the atmosphere in first class has transformed. What began as subtle discrimination has evolved into obvious hostility from Rebecca toward Eleanor and Zoe, while other passengers have begun to take sides, some openly supportive of the grandmother and child, others uncomfortable but unwilling to intervene. It's 10:35 a.m., and the aircraft cruises smoothly at 35,000 feet over the Midwest. The cabin is cool, intentionally kept several degrees lower than economy class as part of the premium experience. Eleanor notices Zoe rubbing her arms against the chill. Are you cold, sweetheart? She asks quietly. Zoe nods. A little bit. Eleanor presses the call button once more. As before, it remains illuminated and unacknowledged by Rebecca, who is visible in the galley arranging dessert plates. After several minutes, Michael notices the light and approaches their row. How can I help you? And he asks. My granddaughter is a bit cold, Eleanor explains. Would it be possible to get a blanket for her? Of course, Michael responds promptly. I'll bring that right away. He returns quickly with a neatly folded blanket, still sealed in plastic. Here you go, he says, handing it to Zoe with a warm smile. These are actually my favorite blankets of any airline. Super soft. Zoe's face brightens as she unwraps the blanket. Thank you, from the galley. Rebecca watches this interaction with evident disapproval. As Michael turns to leave, she gestures him over sharply. Their conversation is just audible from Eleanor's seat. Those premium blankets are for elite status members only, Rebecca hisses. Not for every passenger who gets cold. Michael looks genuinely confused. That's not the policy. All first-class passengers receive blankets upon request. Well, I'm implementing a new policy, Rebecca insists. We're running low on supplies. Michael glances toward the overhead bins, where dozens of identical sealed blankets are clearly visible. We have plenty of stock for this flight, he points out reasonably. Rebecca's expression hardens. Just follow my lead on this, okay? Some passengers deserve the premium experience. Others are clearly just here because of some mistake in the boarding process. The implication is clear, and deeply contrary to Horizon Airways' core values of inclusivity and equal service regardless of how a passenger obtained their ticket. These values were established by Eleanor herself when she founded the airline, enshrined in training materials, and reinforced through regular staff development. Michael's discomfort is visible, but he says nothing further. Returning to his duties in economy class, Rebecca, seemingly emboldened by his retreat, approaches Eleanor and Zoe with dessert service. Unlike the carefully plated desserts offered to other first-class passengers, artful arrangements of chocolate cake with fresh berries and mint garnish, Eleanor and Zoe receive plain cake slices on paper napkins rather than china plates. Dessert, Rebecca announces curtly, practically dropping the servings onto their tray tables. As she places Zoe's dessert down, she accidentally knocks over the child's water glass, spilling it across the tray table and onto Zoe's blanket. Oh, Rebecca says without genuine concern. These things happen. She makes no move to help clean up the spill, instead watching with barely concealed satisfaction as water drips onto Zoe's lap. The little girl's eyes widen with surprise and distress. Eleanor maintains her composure, quickly using her own napkin to blot the worst of the spill. It's all right, sweetheart. Just a little water. From across the aisle, Morgan Taylor witnesses the deliberate nature of the spill. Without hesitation, she stands and retrieves a stack of napkins from the galley, bringing them to Eleanor and Zoe. Here you go, she offers kindly. Let me help. Rebecca watches this interaction with narrowed eyes. Please return to your seat, ma'am, she says sharply. The seatbelt sign might illuminate at any moment due to turbulence. The seatbelt sign is off, and the captain has announced smooth flying conditions for the foreseeable future. Morgan ignores the directive, helping Eleanor mop up the spill before returning to her seat. As she passes Rebecca in the aisle, she meets the flight attendant's gaze directly, a silent communication of disapproval that causes Rebecca to flush with anger. It's 10:52 a.m., and the video of Rebecca's treatment of Eleanor and Zoe has begun its journey through Horizon Airways corporate channels in a way no one on the aircraft yet realizes. In San Francisco, Eleanor Jackson, Eleanor's daughter and Zoe's mother, has received the video clip her daughter managed to send using the aircraft's Wi-Fi. As West Coast Operations Director for Horizon Airways, Janelle immediately recognizes the gravity of what she's witnessing. Without hesitation, she forwards the video to Thomas Bradford, Regional Director, and Sophia Martinez, VP of Customer Experience. The accompanying message is brief and professional. Urgent review needed. Passenger discrimination incident in progress on Flight 923. Passenger in video is Eleanor Jackson. Within minutes, the response comes, understood, monitoring situation, response team being assembled for arrival in SFO, maintain normal operations for now to avoid escalation mid-flight. Back on the aircraft, the tension continues to build. Rebecca has now shifted from passive neglect to active hostility, making no attempt to hide her disdain for Eleanor and Zoe. When she distributes warm towels to first-class passengers before landing, preparation, she walks directly past row 2 without acknowledgement. When Mr. Robertson points out the oversight, Rebecca responds loudly enough for everyone to hear. Some passengers create extra work for the crew. They don't get premium amenities. Eleanor remains unruffled by this blatant discrimination, but she notices Zoe's shoulders slump slightly. The ball of her first flight experience is being systematically diminished by Rebecca's behavior. Leaning close to her granddaughter, Eleanor whispers, "Remember, sweetheart, how people treat you says more about them than it does about you." Zoe nods. Though her earlier excitement has clearly faded, she continues recording discreetly, documenting each interaction with a maturity beyond her years. It's 11:42 a.m., and unbeknownst to anyone on the aircraft, the video Zoe sent has now been viewed by 7 Horizon Airways executives. The clip, showing Rebecca's discriminatory service and openly hostile comments, has reached 157,000 views on internal messaging channels. Emergency protocols have been activated. A response team has been assembled at San Francisco International Airport. What began as a simple first flight for a 9-year-old girl has transformed into a defining moment for Horizon Airways' commitment to its core values. And through it all, Eleanor Jackson, founder, CEO, and visionary, sits quietly in seat 2B and allowing events to unfold naturally, knowing that authentic change requires seeing the truth, however uncomfortable it might be. Internal company response begins. In the sleek headquarters of Horizon Airways in downtown San Francisco, an emergency response team has assembled in the crisis management room. The wall-mounted screens display flight tracking data for Flight 923, currently 30,000 feet above Nebraska, along with the video clips Janelle Jackson has forwarded from her daughter. Sophia Martinez, VP of Customer Experience, watches the footage with increasing concern. Her expression darkens as she witnesses Rebecca's treatment of Eleanor and Zoe. "This is unacceptable," she states firmly, "completely contrary to our service standards and ethical guidelines." Thomas Bradford, Regional Director, nods in agreement. The fact that it's happening to Eleanor makes it worse from a PR perspective, but this would be unacceptable treatment for any passenger. This sentiment, that discrimination is wrong regardless of who experiences it, reflects the core values Eleanor instilled in the company from its founding. The executives aren't primarily concerned about Eleanor's status. They're disturbed by the violation of dignity that any passenger would deserve. "Do we inform the captain?" asked Derek Foster, head of in-flight services. He could address this immediately. Sophia considers this option carefully. "I'm concerned about escalating the situation mid-flight. If the flight attendant realizes she's been discriminating against the CEO, it could create an even more uncomfortable environment for all passengers." "Agreed," Thomas nods. "Our priority should be ensuring the remainder of the flight is as smooth as possible for everyone on board, then addressing the situation thoroughly upon landing. The decision is made. They will monitor the situation but intervene only if absolutely necessary for passenger safety or well-being. Meanwhile, they'll prepare a comprehensive response for when the aircraft touches down in San Francisco. Contact the SFO team," Sophia directs. "I want a full reception committee ready when that plane lands. And alert legal. We'll need statements from passengers who witnessed this behavior." As the team mobilizes, the social media monitoring division reports a concerning development. Morgan Taylor has tweeted about the incident without naming the airline or passengers involved. "Flight attendant openly discriminating against Black grandmother and child in first class. Recording everything. This is Twinoe. How is this still happening? #TravelWhileBlack." The post has gained traction quickly, with over 3,000 retweets in just 15 minutes. Though Horizon Airways isn't identified, it's only a matter of time before someone makes the connection. "Get ahead of this," Sophia instructs the communications team. "Prepare a statement acknowledging we're aware of an incident, investigating thoroughly, and committed to our zero-tolerance policy for discrimination. Don't release yet, but have it ready." It's 11:55 a.m., and as the crisis team works, the social media response continues to grow. Morgan's tweet has attracted attention from civil rights organizations and travel bloggers. The hashtag #TravelWhileBlack is trending nationally. Meanwhile, Horizon's internal monitoring system has flagged an unusual pattern. Multiple passengers on Flight 923 are filling out customer service complaints through the in-flight entertainment system. 5 separate reports have been submitted regarding Rebecca's behavior, including detailed accounts from Linda Matthews and Rafael Mendez. Back at headquarters, Janelle Jackson receives another video from her daughter, this one showing the water spilling incident. Her concern grows as she witnesses her mother and daughter being deliberately humiliated. "They should be enjoying this special moment," she says quietly to Thomas. "Zoe's been looking forward to her first flight for months." Thomas places a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "Your mother built this airline on principles of dignity and respect. What's happening right now violates everything we stand for, and it will be addressed comprehensively. I promise you that." Janelle nods, her expression resolute. As West Coast Operations Director, she understands the complexities of airline management. As a daughter and mother, she feels the personal impact of watching her family experience discrimination. I know my mother, she says after a moment. She's letting this play out for a reason. She's always said that real change requires seeing the problem clearly, not just addressing symptoms. At 12:15 p.m., the crisis team receives notification that Flight 923 has begun its initial descent into the San Francisco area. The captain's routine communication with the ground control gives no indication he's aware of the situation unfolding in first class. Sophia makes a final decision about the reception committee. I'll meet the flight personally, along with Thomas and security. We'll handle this professionally and decisively, but we need to ensure there's no public confrontation that could escalate the situation further. As preparations continue, the video reaches Horizon Airways board chair, William Hayes. His response is immediate and unequivocal. This represents a fundamental breach of our core values. I expect a complete investigation and appropriate consequences. Eleanor's vision for this airline will not be compromised by discriminatory behavior. By 12:45 p.m., as Flight 923 begins its approach to San Francisco International Airport, the video Zoe sent has reached 478,000 views across various internal channels and secure messaging platforms. Horizon Airways employees at all levels are witnessing a profound violation of the company's foundational principles. What began as one child's documentation of injustice has transformed into a defining moment for an entire corporation. The systems Eleanor Jackson put in place, anonymous reporting, clear ethical guidelines, zero tolerance for discrimination, are now being activated to address behavior that directly contradicts her vision for air travel that treats everyone with dignity, regardless of appearance, background, or circumstance. The response team is in place. The protocols are activated. And as Flight 923 descends towards San Francisco, no one, least of all Rebecca Whitfield, realizes that a moment of reckoning awaits on the ground. Eleanor and Zoe's mid-flight conversation at 12:15 p.m. As Flight 923 begins its journey across the Rocky Mountains, Eleanor notices Zoe's unusually quiet demeanor. The child who had been bouncing with excitement about her first flight now sits subdued, occasionally glancing toward the galley where Rebecca continues to direct hostile looks their way. Eleanor gently places her hand over her granddaughter's. "What's on your mind, sweetheart?" Zoe looks up, her expression serious beyond her years. "Why is she being so mean to us, Grandma? What did we do wrong?" The question hangs in the air, heavy with implications that no child should have to contemplate. Eleanor considers her response carefully, balancing honesty with age-appropriate explanation. "We didn't do anything wrong," she says finally. "Sometimes people make judgments based on what they see rather than who someone truly is. They look at the color of our skin and make assumptions." Zoe processes this information, her brow furrowed in concentration. "You mean she's being mean because we're black?" Eleanor nods sadly. "That's part of it, yes. She saw us and decided we didn't belong in first class, without knowing anything about us." "But that's not fair," Zoe protests, her sense of justice kindling indignation. "You built this whole airline. These are your planes." "Yes," Eleanor agrees. "And that's why this moment is so important. It's showing us something that needs to be fixed." Zoe considers this, then asks the question that has clearly been on her mind. "Why don't you tell her who you are?" "Grandma, then she'd have to be nice to us." It's a perfectly reasonable question from a child's perspective. Why endure mistreatment when a single sentence could transform the entire dynamic? Eleanor smiles gently, recognizing an opportunity to share an important lesson. "I could do that," she acknowledges, "and she would certainly change her behavior immediately. But would that change how she treats the next family who looks like us? Or would she just learn to be more careful about who she discriminates against?" Zoe's eyes widen as she grasps the implications. She'd just be nice to important people, but still mean to regular people who look like us. "Exactly." Eleanor nods. "Sometimes strategic patience is more powerful than immediate reaction. By documenting what's happening, we create the opportunity for real change, not just a temporary fix." She glances toward the galley where Rebecca is arranging service items with sharp, angry movements. "What we're experiencing right now, this is what many people face every day when they travel, when they shop, when they simply exist in spaces others think they don't belong. My position gives me the power to address it systemically, but only if I truly understand how it feels. Zoe absorbs this wisdom, her expression thoughtful. So we're collecting evidence like detectives. Eleanor smiles at the characterization. In a way, yes, evidence that will help make flying better for everyone, not just us. That's why I'm recording, Zoe concludes, her sense of purpose renewed. So people will believe us and make things better. Exactly right. Documentation creates accountability. That's something I've learned throughout my career. Their conversation is interrupted by turbulence, not severe, but enough to cause the seatbelt sign to illuminate with a soft ding. Eleanor helps Zoe secure her belt, using the moment to change the subject to something more pleasant. Tell me what you've enjoyed most about flying so far, she suggests. Zoe's face brightens. I liked takeoff when we went up through the clouds and everything below got small, and I liked the sunset colors on the clouds. Eleanor smiles, grateful to see her granddaughter's enthusiasm returning. Those are some of my favorite things too, even after all these years. Will we fly together again? Zoe asks hopefully. Many times, Eleanor promises, and each flight will get better as we continue to improve the experience for everyone. As their conversation continues, shifting to lighter topics about cloud formations and the geography visible below, Eleanor notices Morgan Taylor watching them with obvious sympathy from across the aisle. The young woman offers a small smile of solidarity, which Eleanor returns with a grateful nod. It's 12:35 p.m., 90 minutes until landing. And despite Rebecca's determined efforts to diminish their experience, Eleanor has managed to create a meaningful teaching moment for her granddaughter. Zoe is learning not just about flight, but about dignity, strategic patience, and the power of documentation to create change. Lessons far more valuable than the premium amenities Rebecca has withheld. And perhaps most importantly, she's learning that her grandmother, a pioneer, a CEO, a builder of companies, is also a teacher of resilience, showing by example how to maintain grace under pressure and transform personal discomfort into opportunity for collective improvement. As the Rocky Mountains pass beneath them, Eleanor Jackson and her granddaughter share a quiet moment of connection, their bond strengthened rather than diminished by the challenges they've faced together in the confined space of Flight 923's first-class cabin. Viral spread accelerates. As Flight 923 crosses into California airspace, the story of what's happening on board has begun spreading far beyond Horizon Airways' internal channels. Morgan Taylor's initial tweet, though deliberately vague about the airline and passengers involved, has gained significant traction. By 12:45 p.m., her post has been retweeted over 18,000 times and generated a robust conversation about racial discrimination in travel. Civil rights organizations, travel bloggers, and airline industry observers have amplified the message, turning #TravelWhileBlack into a trending topic nationwide. Another example of how the premium experience isn't equally available to all paying customers. #TravelWhileBlack. Watched an elderly black woman and her granddaughter being treated like trespassers in first class today. In Twitter, disgusting. #TravelWhileBlack. Airlines need to be held accountable for how their staff treats passengers of color. Period. #TravelWhileBlack. The absence of specific identifying details has created a vacuum that social media users are eagerly filling with speculation. Aviation enthusiasts begin tracking flights currently in progress, attempting to identify which aircraft might be hosting this incident. Looking at transcontinental flights currently in air, narrowed to 7 possibilities. Anyone have airline confirmation? #TravelWhileBlack. At Horizon Airways headquarters, the social media monitoring team watches this development with increasing concern. While the company hasn't yet been identified by name, it's only a matter of time before someone makes the connection. Morgan Taylor's LinkedIn shows she frequently flies Horizon. A team member notes. Several responses are already guessing it's us. Sophia Martinez makes a rapid decision. Activate our prepared statement now. Acknowledge we're aware of a reported incident. Express our zero-tolerance policy for discrimination. And commit to a thorough investigation. Let's control the narrative before speculation does it for us. Within minutes, Horizon Airways' official social media accounts post a carefully worded statement. Horizon Airways is aware of reports regarding an in-progress flight incident. We take all allegations of discriminatory treatment extremely seriously. Our zero-tolerance policy for discrimination is a core value. We are actively investigating and will take appropriate action. Every passenger deserves dignity and respect. The statement generates immediate reaction. Some praise the quick response, while others criticize the generic corporate language. But most importantly, it confirms what many had already suspected. The incident is occurring on a Horizon Airways flight. Aviation news outlets pick up the story, publishing headlines that capture attention across the industry. Discrimination allegations hit Horizon Airways mid-flight. Black passengers reportedly mistreated on Horizon First Class. Social media documents alleged bias incident on transcontinental flight. By 1:10 p.m., as Flight 923 begins its initial descent into the San Francisco area, the video Zoe sent has reached 478,000 views. What began as private documentation has transformed into a viral moment that threatens to define Horizon Airways in the public consciousness. The company's stock price, which had been stable throughout the morning, dips 2–3% as traders react to the emerging public relations challenge. Financial analysts issue cautious statements about potential reputation damage if the situation isn't handled effectively. Horizon has built its brand on inclusivity and customer experience, notes aviation industry analyst Maria Chen. This incident directly challenges that narrative. How they respond will be crucial for maintaining market position and consumer trust. Back on the aircraft, completely unaware of the digital firestorm brewing around her actions, Rebecca Whitfield continues to her pattern of differential treatment. As landing preparation begins, she distributes hot towels and final beverages to first-class passengers, skipping row 2 entirely despite their clearly visible call button. When Michael notices and approaches with towels for Eleanor and Zoe, Rebecca intercepts him in the galley. "I told you I'm handling first class," she hisses. "Stop undermining my authority." Michael stands his ground, his expression resolute. "These passengers have been consistently overlooked during service. I'm ensuring they receive what they've paid for." "They didn't pay for anything," Rebecca retorts dismissively. "People like that don't belong up here. They're probably using stolen points or some diversity program upgrade." Her words, spoken too loudly in the confined space of the galley, carry to nearby passengers. Rafael Mendez, returning from the lavatory, overhears the exchange and pauses, visibly shocked by Rebecca's explicit bias. It's 1:25 p.m., 20 minutes until landing, and Rebecca's behavior has now crossed from subtle discrimination to overt prejudice witnessed by multiple passengers. The evidence against her continues to accumulate, documented by Zoe's phone, Morgan's recordings, and now the direct observation of other first-class travelers. Meanwhile, at San Francisco International Airport, a reception committee has assembled near Gate 42, where Flight 923 is scheduled to arrive. Sophia Martinez and Thomas Bradford review final preparations with airport security and Horizon Airways ground staff. Their plan is precise, designed to address the situation professionally while minimizing public disruption. "Remember," Sophia instructs the team, "this will be handled with dignity and respect for all involved. Our priority is ensuring accountability while maintaining our commitment to professional conduct." As Flight 923 begins its final approach to San Francisco, descending through scattered clouds toward the runway, none of the passengers or crew realize that what began as a routine transcontinental flight has transformed into a defining moment for Horizon Airways, a real-world test of whether the company's stated values truly guide its operations when the founder herself experiences discrimination at the hands of her own employee. The stage is set for a resolution that will either reinforce Horizon's commitment to dignity for all passengers or reveal a gap between corporate rhetoric and operational reality. And at the center of it all sits Eleanor Jackson, the visionary who built the airline from a single leased plane to an industry leader, experiencing firsthand how her creation treats those it doesn't recognize as worthy of respect. Rebecca begins to sense trouble as Flight 923 begins its final descent into the San Francisco area. Subtle shifts in the cabin atmosphere suggest that something has changed. Rebecca Whitfield, moving through first class with pre-landing beverages, notices that more passengers than before are recording her interactions on their phones. Morgan Taylor makes no attempt to hide her documentation now, holding her phone at eye level as Rebecca passes. Rafael Mendez has joined her, his own device capturing Rebecca's movements from a different angle. Even the Robertsons, who had initially seemed sympathetic to Rebecca's treatment of Eleanor and Zoe, now watch with uncomfortable expressions. Mrs. Robertson whispering something to her husband that causes him to frown deeply. Rebecca falters slightly, her practiced efficiency disrupted by the feeling of being observed, evaluated, judged. She approaches Michael near the galley, keeping her voice low. "What's going on? Why is everyone recording?" Michael's response is professional, but cool. "Passengers have the right to document their flight experience." "But why me specifically?" Rebecca presses, genuine concern creeping into her voice for the first time. "Have I done something wrong?" The question hangs in the air, notable for its lack of self-awareness. Michael hesitates, clearly weighing his response carefully. "I think," he says finally, "that passengers have concerns about service consistency." It's a diplomatic answer, but Rebecca isn't satisfied. She glances toward row 2, where Eleanor sits calmly reading a book to Zoe. Nothing about their appearance or behavior suggests importance or influence, yet somehow they've become the center of attention. "Those two," Rebecca says, nodding toward Eleanor and Zoe. "There's something strange about them. Who are they really?" Michael's expression reveals nothing. Paying first-class passengers entitled to the same service as everyone else in this cabin. Rebecca's face hardens at what she perceives as criticism. "I've been flying this route for 16 years. I know how to manage my cabin." "Of course," Michael responds neutrally, though his eyes convey a different message. As Rebecca returns to her duties, she notices Linda Matthews filling out a form on her in-flight entertainment screen, the distinctive layout of Horizon Airways' customer feedback system clearly visible. Similar screens glow on several other passengers' displays. A sense of unease begins to take root. Throughout her career, Rebecca has received occasional complaints, all dismissed by her former supervisor as misunderstandings or unreasonable passenger expectations. But something about this feels different. The collective documentation, the whispered conversations, the constant recording devices aimed in her direction. At 1:10 p.m., 35 minutes before landing, Rebecca makes a strategic decision to minimize her presence in the first-class cabin. She retreats to the galley, focusing on landing preparation tasks that keep her out of the passenger's sight. Helen notices her colleague's unusual behavior. "Everything okay?" she asks as they check safety equipment. "Fine," Rebecca responds curtly. "Just ready to be done with by this flight." Helen hesitates, then speaks with cautious concern. "That grandmother and little girl in row 2. I think there might be something important about them." Rebecca's head snaps up. "What do you mean?" "I'm not sure exactly," Helen admits. "But the way other passengers are reacting, how many people are recording, it feels significant." Rebecca dismisses the suggestion with the wave. "They're just playing the victim card. People do it all the time to get special treatment or free upgrades on their next flight." But despite her dismissive words, doubt has taken root. Rebecca finds herself reviewing her actions throughout the flight, searching for anything that might justify the unusual attention. In her mind, she's done nothing wrong, simply maintained service standards and ensured that first class remains an exclusive experience. Yet the evidence of multiple passengers documenting her behavior suggests a different interpretation. As the captain announces their final approach to San Francisco, Rebecca peers through the galley curtain at Eleanor and Zoe. The grandmother continues reading calmly to her granddaughter, both seemingly untroubled by the tension around them. There's a quiet dignity in their demeanor that contrasts sharply with Rebecca's growing agitation. "Who are you really?" she whispers it to herself, studying Eleanor's profile with newfound uncertainty. For the first time since the flight began, doubt creeps into Rebecca's assessment. The woman's composure, her articulate responses, her knowledge of airline policies. Could she be more than just an ordinary passenger? Perhaps a journalist doing a story on travel discrimination? Or a secret shopper hired to evaluate service quality? The possibilities multiply in Rebecca's mind, none of them approaching the truth that would soon transform her career and life. As the aircraft descends through 10,000 feet, the seatbelt sign illuminates with a soft ding. Rebecca steels herself to return to the cabin for final landing preparations, aware of the watching eyes and recording devices that await. "Just get through landing," she tells herself. "File your report about their recording. Let management handle it." But as she steps back into the first-class cabin, the atmosphere has shifted perceptibly. The air feels charged with anticipation, as if passengers are waiting for something significant to occur. Even the Robertsons watch her with expressions that have transformed from supportive to concerned. Rebecca completes her landing checks with mechanical efficiency, avoiding eye contact with Eleanor and Zoe. Her movements are stiff, her usual confidence replaced by growing apprehension. Something has changed, though she cannot identify what. As the aircraft makes its final approach to San Francisco International Airport, neither Rebecca nor the passengers realize that a reception committee awaits at Gate 42, a team assembled specifically to address what has occurred on this flight. The consequences of Rebecca's actions throughout the journey are about to become dramatically apparent, transforming what she believed was routine service discretion into a defining moment of accountability. The wheels touch down on California soil at exactly 1:35 p.m., bringing Flight 923 to its destination. But for Rebecca Whitfield, the most significant journey of the day is about to begin, one that will challenge everything she believes about service, standards, and who truly belongs in the first-class cabin of Horizon Airways. Approach to San Francisco. The landscape beneath Flight 923 transforms from the rugged Sierra Nevada mountains to the distinct geography of the San Francisco Bay Area. The aircraft descends steadily, offering passengers spectacular views of the bay, the iconic Golden Gate Bridge, and the city's distinctive skyline rising from the peninsula. Captain Robert Anderson's voice comes through the cabin speakers. Ladies and gentlemen, we're beginning our final approach to San Francisco International Airport. Current weather is sunny and 72 degrees with light winds. We'll be touching down in approximately 15 minutes, a few minutes ahead of our scheduled arrival time. Flight attendants, please prepare the cabin for landing. In first class, Rebecca Whitfield emerges from the galley, her professional mask firmly in place despite her growing unease. She begins the standard landing preparation, checking that seats are upright, tray tables are stowed, and all carry-on items are properly secured. When she reaches row 2, her interactions with Eleanor and Zoe remain coldly minimal, though the open hostility from earlier has been replaced by careful neutrality. Prepare for landing, she instructs without making eye contact. Quickly moving past them to row 3, Eleanor notices the subtle shift in Rebecca's demeanor, the slight tension in her shoulders, the way her eyes dart around the cabin, registering the multiple phones still recording her movements. It's the behavior of someone beginning to sense consequences approaching. At 1:25 p.m., Eleanor's phone vibrates with a text message from her daughter Janelle. Company response team ready at gate, multiple executives present. How would you like to proceed? Eleanor reads the message with a slight smile, appreciating her organization's efficiency. Her reply is simple. Standard protocol, no special treatment. Let this be a learning opportunity for all. Zoe notices the message. Is that Mom? She asks. Does she know what's happening? Yes, Eleanor confirms quietly. She's making sure we're taken care of when we land. Are they going to fire the mean flight attendant? Zoe whispers. Her understanding of consequences straightforward as only a child's can be. Eleanor considers her response carefully. What happens next will depend on many factors. But the most important thing is making sure this situation helps Horizon Airways become better at serving all passengers with dignity. Across the aisle, Morgan Taylor leans slightly toward them. I just wanted to say, she offers quietly, that I'm sorry you've had to experience this. I've documented everything and already submitted a formal complaint. Thank you, Eleanor responds with genuine appreciation. That was very thoughtful. Morgan hesitates, then adds, I fly this route twice monthly, and I've never seen anything like this before. This isn't representative of my usual experience with Horizon. Eleanor's smile is warm. I'm very glad to hear that. The exchange is brief but significant, a passenger feeling compelled to apologize for a company's service failure, unaware she's speaking to the founder herself. It's exactly the kind of feedback Eleanor values most, unfiltered by knowledge of her position. As the plane continues its descent, the cabin crew completes final preparations. Michael passes through first class, checking seatbelts with professional courtesy. When he reaches Eleanor and Zoe, he offers a small, apologetic smile. Almost there, Shamo, he says warmly to Zoe. Was this your first flight? Zoe nods, her earlier enthusiasm somewhat dampened by the day's events. Yes, my grandma brought me. Well, I hope the landing is magical for you. Michael says sincerely. It's my favorite part. This simple kindness, treating a child as worthy of engagement and consideration, stands in stark contrast to Rebecca's behavior throughout the flight. Eleanor notes the difference, making a mental note to acknowledge Michael's professionalism later. From the cockpit, Captain Anderson provides another update. Flight attendants, please be seated for landing. We're number 2 for approach, touching down in approximately 7 minutes. Rebecca takes her jump seat at the front of the aircraft. Her expression tense as she secures her harness. From this position, she has a clear view of first class, including Eleanor and Zoe in row 2. For the first time since the flight began, she studies them with genuine curiosity rather than dismissive judgment. There's something about the older woman's composure that suddenly seems familiar. Though Rebecca can't quite place it, the dignity with which she's handled the entire situation, the quiet authority in her voice when citing company policies, the way she's focused on her granddaughter's experience despite the poor service, these qualities suggest someone accustomed to command, to being respected. As the aircraft makes its final approach, descending through scattered clouds toward the runway, Rebecca finds herself wondering if she's missed something important. The multiple passengers recording her actions, the whispered conversations, the subtle shift in atmosphere, it all points to something beyond a routine service interaction. Eleanor receives another text, this one from Thomas Bradford. Reception team in position, security present, media monitoring activated, handling with discretion per your request. She responds simply, thank you. Let's make this a teaching moment. The wheels touch down on the runway with a gentle bump, the reverse thrusters engaging with a roar as the aircraft slows. Zoe's face lights up at the new sensation, her hands gripping the armrests tightly. We're here, added Grandma. We flew all the way to California. Eleanor smiles at her granddaughter's renewed excitement. We certainly did, sweetheart, and you were very brave during the whole journey. As the plane taxis toward the gate, passengers begin the usual post-landing routine, turning on phones, gathering belongings, preparing for deplaning. But in first class, an unusual tension persists. Multiple passengers continue recording, their devices capturing every interaction as the aircraft approaches its final parking position. Rebecca completes her landing duties mechanically, her earlier confidence replaced by growing apprehension. Something about this arrival feels different, as if the usual rules and expectations have shifted in ways she doesn't yet understand. At exactly 1:45 p.m., Flight 923 arrives at Gate 42, the jet bridge extending to connect with the aircraft door. What awaits on the other side will transform an ordinary transcontinental flight into a defining moment for Horizon Airways, for Rebecca Whitfield, and for the culture of air travel itself. Eleanor's internal decision. As Flight 923 taxis to the gate, Eleanor Jackson finds herself at a decisive moment. Through the aircraft window, she can see the reception committee assembling, Sophia Martinez, Thomas Bradford, security personnel, and various staff members positioned strategically near the jet bridge. The company has mobilized precisely as protocols dictate for a high-priority incident. All the systems she put in place over decades are functioning exactly as designed. Now she must decide how this situation concludes, not just for herself and Zoe, but for Horizon Airways and its 18,000 employees. Eleanor closes her eyes briefly, reflecting on her journey to this moment. 35 years ago, she'd started with a single leased aircraft and a vision of an airline that treated every passenger with dignity, regardless of appearance, background, or ticket price. She'd faced skepticism, prejudice, and outright hostility from an industry dominated by white men who couldn't imagine a black woman succeeding in their space. Each obstacle had strengthened her resolve. Each dismissal had fueled her determination to build something different, an airline where the core values weren't just marketing slogans, but operational imperatives. And yet, here she sits in the first-class cabin of her own creation, having experienced the same discrimination she founded Horizon Airways to eliminate. The irony isn't lost on her, nor is the opportunity this moment presents. She could respond with righteous anger, with public humiliation of the employee who treated them poorly. She could ensure Rebecca Whitfield never works in aviation again. Her power to do so is absolute within the company she built from nothing. But what lesson would that teach Zoe about handling injustice? What message would it send to her employees about how Horizon addresses failures? Eleanor's philosophy has always been that true leadership isn't about punishing mistakes, but transforming them into opportunities for growth, not just for individuals, but for entire systems. The incident today has revealed a gap between Horizon's stated values and its operational reality. Addressing that gap requires wisdom, not vindictiveness. Beside her, Zoe watches the ground crew position the jet bridge, her earlier excitement returning now that they've reached their destination. "Grandma," she says quietly, "are you going to tell her who you are now?" Eleanor smiles gently. "Yes, sweetheart. It's time for truth now." "Will she get in trouble?" Zoe asks, her expression complex, a mixture of justified indignation and childish concern for consequences. "What happens next will depend on many factors," Eleanor explains. "But the most important thing isn't punishment, it's growth and change." She thinks about Rebecca Whitfield, about the patterns of behavior that suggest this isn't an isolated incident, but rather an established approach to passengers she deems unworthy of first-class treatment. The discrimination they've experienced today likely reflects the experiences of countless other passengers who lack the power or platform to address it. At 1:30 p.m., Eleanor makes her decision. This incident will become a catalyst for systemic improvement, not just an opportunity for individual discipline. It will be handled with the same dignity she expects her airline to show all passengers, firmly but without unnecessary humiliation. She texts Sofia Martinez one final instruction: full accountability with dignity. This becomes our case study for improvement, not just discipline. Recorded statement from me to be shared in all future training. As the aircraft comes to a complete stop at gate 42, Eleanor prepares for what comes next. She helps Zoe gather her belongings, ensuring Captain the Penguin is safely tucked into her backpack. She straightens her simple cardigan and touches the wedding ring hanging from the chain around her neck, a ritual that has centered her before important moments throughout her career. "Remember, Zoe," she says quietly, "how we respond to mistreatment matters as much as the mistreatment itself. We choose dignity over revenge, improvement over punishment." Zoe nods solemnly, absorbing wisdom beyond her years. Like Michelle Obama said, "When they go low, we go high." Eleanor smiles, proud of her granddaughter's understanding. Exactly like that, the captain's voice comes over the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to San Francisco International Airport. Local time is 1:45 p.m., and the temperature is a pleasant 72 degrees. Please remain seated with your seatbelts fastened until the aircraft has come to a complete stop and the seatbelt sign has been turned off." There's a brief pause before he continues, his tone subtly different. "We've been asked to make a special announcement. All passengers please remain seated and after arrival. Horizon Airways management will be boarding briefly before deplaning begins." The unusual request draws curious glances throughout the cabin. Rebecca, securing the galley for arrival, freezes momentarily, her expression shifting from confusion to alarm as she processes the implications. Eleanor watches this realization dawn on Rebecca's face, the first indication that consequences are imminent. But rather than satisfaction, Eleanor feels a complex mixture of disappointment that such intervention is necessary and a determination to use this moment for meaningful change. As the seatbelt sign dings off, Eleanor remains seated, her expression calm and dignified. The stage is set for a resolution that will demonstrate whether Horizon Airways truly lives its values, whether the company she built can acknowledge failure, accept accountability, and transform a moment of discrimination into an opportunity for growth. The aircraft door opens, and Sofia Martinez steps aboard, followed by Thomas Bradford and two security officers. Their presence signals that what happens next isn't simply about one passenger's complaint, but about the fundamental values of an entire organization. Eleanor Jackson, founder and CEO, watches with the quiet confidence of someone who understands that true power isn't expressed through humiliation or vindictiveness, but through transformative action that creates lasting change. Landing and deboarding preparation. The aircraft door opens with a hydraulic hiss, and Sofia Martinez steps aboard with practiced professionalism. Her tailored suit and confident bearing mark her as a senior executive even before she identifies herself to the flight crew. Behind her, Thomas Bradford and two airport security officers follow at a measured distance, present but not intrusive. Rebecca Whitfield stands near the galley, her expression shifting rapidly from confusion to apprehension as she registers the security presence. Captain Anderson emerges from the cockpit, his face serious as he approaches Sofia. Captain, Sophia greets him with a nod. Thank you for your cooperation. Of course, and he responds. Though I'm still unclear about the nature of the situation. We'll brief you fully afterward, Sophia assures him. For now, we need to address a serious customer service incident that occurred during this flight. Throughout the cabin, passengers watch with rapt attention, sensing that something significant is unfolding. Phones continue recording, documenting this unusual arrival procedure. Sophia turns to address the first-class cabin, her voice clear and professional. Ladies and gentlemen, I apologize for the brief delay in deplaning. I'm Sophia Martinez, Vice President of Customer Experience for Horizon Airways. We're responding to reports of a service incident on this flight. We appreciate your patience as we address this matter. Her gaze settles on Rebecca, who stands rigid with growing realization. Ms. Whitfield, would you join us in the jetway? Please. Rebecca glances toward the cockpit, perhaps hoping the captain will intervene, but he remains neutral, clearly deferring to the executive team. With visible reluctance, Rebecca moves toward the aircraft door. Wait, the single word, spoken with quiet authority, comes from row 2. All eyes turn toward Eleanor Jackson, who rises slowly from her seat, her dignified presence drawing immediate attention. Beside her, Zoe remains seated, watching her grandmother with wissy, attentive eyes. I believe, Eleanor continues, her voice measured and clear, that whatever needs to be said should be said here, where the incident occurred. Transparency serves us all. Sophia hesitates, glancing between Eleanor and Rebecca. Dr. Jackson, we can handle this privately if you prefer. The use of Eleanor's title and name sends a visible shockwave through the cabin. Passengers exchange startled glances as recognition dawns. The Robertsons in row 3 appear particularly stunned, Mrs. Robertson's hand rising to cover her mouth in horror. Rebecca Whitfield stands frozen, her face draining of color as the implications register fully. Dr. Jackson, she repeats, her voice barely audible. As in, Eleanor Jackson, Thomas Bradford confirms, his tone neutral but firm. Founder and CEO of Horizon Airways. The revelation lands with seismic force. Throughout the cabin, passengers react with audible gasps and murmured exclamations. Morgan Taylor's eyes widen in shock before she quickly resumes recording, now understanding the full significance of what she's documented. Rebecca sways slightly, grasping the back of a seat for support. I had no idea. That was rather the point. Eleanor responds without rancor. I regularly travel on Horizon flights incognito to experience our service as ordinary passengers do. Today was meant to be special. My granddaughter's first flight experience. She gestures toward Zoe, who looks up with a mixture of pride and solemnity far beyond her 9 years. Instead, it became a different kind of learning opportunity for both of us. Rebecca's face cycles through emotions rapidly. Shock, horror, panic, and finally, a dawning recognition of the magnitude of her actions. Dr. Jackson, I can explain. Eleanor raises a hand gently, halting her mid-sentence. There's no explanation needed. Ms. Whitfield, your actions throughout this flight have been thoroughly documented, not just by my granddaughter and other passengers, but by our internal monitoring systems. She turns to address the broader cabin. What happened today? The differential treatment, the deliberate service disparities, the dismissive comments, these represent a fundamental violation of Horizon Airways' core values. Every passenger deserves respect and dignity, regardless of appearance, background, or station. Her voice carries no anger, only resolute certainty. This isn't about me personally. It's about ensuring that our company truly lives the values upon which it was founded. Returning her attention to Rebecca, Eleanor continues with the same measured tone. Miss Whitfield, you'll be deplaning with Ms. Martinez and Mr. Bradford to discuss next steps. I want to emphasize that this process will be conducted with the same dignity we expect our passengers to receive. Firmly but fairly, with opportunity for full explanation and response. Rebecca nods mutely, her earlier confidence entirely evaporated in the face of this extraordinary revelation. Sophia steps forward. Ms. Whitfield, please gather your personal belongings and come with us now. As Rebecca complies, moving in a daze toward the galley to collect her bag, Eleanor addresses the remaining passengers. I want to thank those of you who spoke up or documented what you witnessed today. Your willingness to acknowledge and report discriminatory behavior helps us build a better airline for everyone. She makes eye contact with Morgan Taylor and Rafael Mendez, nodding in quiet appreciation of their earlier support. Horizon Airways will be following up with each of you personally. Your feedback is invaluable. It's 1:52 p.m. The truth has been revealed. Rebecca returns with her small roller bag, her movements mechanical as she approaches the aircraft door where Sophia and Thomas wait. Before she exits, Eleanor offers one final comment, spoken not with malice, but with the certainty of someone who has dedicated her life to creating a more equitable world. The standards you sought to protect today, Ms. Whitfield, were never Horizon standards. They were barriers we've worked for 35 years to dismantle. With that, Rebecca Whitfield exits the aircraft, escorted by Horizon executives and security personnel. The first phase of accountability has begun, witnessed by a cabin full of passengers who have just observed a masterclass in leadership, addressing failure directly, without cruelty or excessive humiliation, but with absolute clarity about expectations and values. As the door closes behind them, the cabin erupts in spontaneous applause, not celebrating Rebecca's downfall, but acknowledging Eleanor's handling of a difficult situation with grace and authority. In seat 2A, Zoe Jackson looks up at her grandmother with newfound admiration. "You were amazing, Grandma," she whispers. Eleanor smiles gently, retaking her seat beside her granddaughter. "No, sweetheart, we were amazing together. You had the courage to document truth, and that's where all the revelation moment." As Rebecca Whitfield exits the aircraft with Sophia Martinez, Thomas Bradford, and security personnel, a momentary hush falls over the cabin. The air feels charged with collective realization, passengers processing not just what they've witnessed, but what it represents. Captain Anderson makes a brief announcement. "Ladies and gentlemen, we'll begin our normal deplaning procedure in approximately 5 minutes. We appreciate your patience during this delay." But in the brief interval before regular deplaning begins, passengers turn their attention to Eleanor Jackson, many seeing her now through an entirely new lens. The unassuming grandmother in simple clothing has been revealed as one of the most powerful women in the aviation industry, a billionaire CEO who chose to experience her own airline as an ordinary passenger would. Morgan Taylor unbuckles her seatbelt and approaches row 2 with respectful hesitation. "Dr. Jackson," she says quietly, "I just wanted to say it's an honor to meet you, though I wish it had been under better circumstances." Eleanor smiles warmly. "Thank you for your kindness during the flight. It meant a great deal to both of us." Morgan glances at her phone, still recording. "I've documented everything. Would you prefer I delete the footage now that it's been addressed?" "Absolutely not." Eleanor responds without hesitation. "That documentation is valuable. It shows us exactly where we need to improve." From row 1, Rafael Mendez stands, adjusting his tie before approaching. "Dr. Jackson, Rafael Mendez, Western Regional Sales Director at Teleris Technologies. I've followed your career for years. The way you handled this situation was masterful." Eleanor accepts the compliment with grace. Sometimes the hardest leadership moments happen outside the boardroom. Mr. Robertson rises from seat 3A, his expression deeply uncomfortable. "Dr. Jackson," he begins, his voice strained with embarrassment. "My wife and we should have said something. We witnessed the treatment you received and remained silent. I'm deeply sorry for that." Mrs. Robertson nods beside him, her earlier disapproval replaced by evident shame. "We've flown Horizon for 15 years. We should have known better." Eleanor regards them thoughtfully. Bearing witness to injustice without speaking up makes us complicit in it, but acknowledgement is the first step toward better choices next time. It's 1:57 p.m. Eleanor Jackson has taken control of the narrative, transforming what could have been merely a disciplinary incident into a teachable moment for everyone present. Meanwhile, in the jetway, Rebecca Whitfield stands frozen as the full magnitude of her actions settles upon her. Sophia Martinez addresses her with professional formality. "Ms. Whitfield, you are being removed from duty effective immediately pending a full investigation into your conduct. Conduct on Flight 923. We have documented numerous violations of Horizon Airways' non-discrimination policy and service standards. Rebecca struggles to find her voice. I had no idea. If I had known who she was, Thomas Bradford interrupts firmly. That's precisely the problem. Ms. Whitfield, our service standards apply equally to all passengers, regardless of status or identity. The fact that you would have treated Dr. Jackson differently had you recognized her as the CEO contradicts our fundamental values as a company, Sophia continues. You'll surrender your company identification and credentials now. Security will escort you to human resources for preliminary documentation. You'll have full opportunity to present your perspective during the formal investigation. As Rebecca fumbles with her ID badge, her hands trembling visibly, a haunting realization dawns in her eyes. 16 years, she whispers. I've worked for Horizon for 16 years. During which time, Thomas notes, checking his tablet, you accumulated 7 prior complaints of discriminatory treatment toward passengers of color, all dismissed by your previous supervisor as misunderstandings. Rebecca's face falls further. Those were different situations. Those passengers were being difficult. Those passengers, Sophia interrupts firmly, deserve the same respect as any others, just as Dr. Jackson and her granddaughter deserve today. Rebecca surrenders her badge and credentials with shaking hands. As security prepares to escort her toward the terminal, she asks one final question, her voice barely audible. Will I lose my job? Sophia's response is measured but offers no false comfort. The investigation will determine appropriate consequences based on our policies and values. But Ms. Whitfield, I must be clear. What multiple witnesses and recordings have documented today represents a fundamental breach of our most essential principles. The outcome will reflect that reality. As Rebecca is led away, Sophia and Thomas exchange troubled glances. Both recognize that this incident represents not just an individual failure but a systemic one. How had someone with Rebecca's attitude toward passengers of color remained in a customer-facing position for 16 years? What gaps in oversight had allowed this pattern to persist back on the aircraft? Eleanor helps Zoe gather their belongings as the deplaning announcement is made. Other passengers stand aside respectfully, allowing the CEO and her granddaughter to exit first, a courtesy Eleanor acknowledges with gracious nods. As they step into the jetway, Sophia and Thomas are waiting. Dr. Jackson, Sophia begins formally, on behalf of Horizon Airways, I want to express our deepest apologies for your experience today. Eleanor raises a hand gently. Save the formal apologies for later. Sophia, right now, I'd like you to meet someone very important. She places her hands on Zoe's shoulders. This is my granddaughter, Zoe. Today was her first flight. Sophia kneels to Zoe's level, her professional demeanor softening. It's a pleasure to meet you, Zoe. I'm so sorry your first flight experience was complicated by what happened. Zoe, displaying remarkable poise for a 9-year-old, responds with simple wisdom. My grandma says sometimes the most important lessons don't come easy. Thomas smiles, clearly impressed. She sounds exactly like her grandmother. Eleanor beams with pride. Zoe was the one who documented everything. She remembered her teacher's lesson about the importance of recording injustice. Sophia looks at the child with newfound respect. Then Horizon Airways owes you a debt of gratitude. Zoe, your courage will help us become better. As they move toward the terminal, Eleanor notices Michael Ramirez, the flight attendant who had shown them kindness throughout the journey, standing uncertainly near the gate area. Mr. Ramirez, she calls, gesturing him over. I wanted to thank you personally for your professionalism today. You exemplified the values Horizon Airways was built upon. Michael approaches with visible nervousness. Dr. Jackson, it's an honor. I just tried to do what was right. And that, Eleanor says firmly, is exactly what we need. I'll be commending your conduct formally to your supervisors. The relief in Michael's expression is evident. He had clearly worried about potential repercussions from the incident. Eleanor's explicit support provides both reassurance and validation of his ethical choices. As they continue toward the VIP lounge, where Janelle Jackson waits to receive her mother and daughter, Eleanor turns to Thomas. I want a full review of our service culture initiated immediately. Today wasn't just about one flight attendant. It was about systems that allowed her approach to persist unchecked. Thomas nods solemnly. Already in motion, we're pulling all previous complaints about Ms. Whitfield for re-examination and we'll be implementing enhanced sensitivity training and monitoring for all customer-facing staff. Good, Eleanor approves. Because what happened today must never happen again, not to me, not to my granddaughter, not to anyone who flies with us. It's 2:05 p.m. Justice has been delivered, not through excessive humiliation or vindictive punishment, but through clear accountability and commitment to systematic improvement. The revelation of Eleanor's identity has transformed a moment of discrimination into a catalyst for change that will affect every aspect of Horizon Airways' operations moving forward. Eleanor speaks, standing in the gate area, surrounded by Horizon Airways executives and curious onlookers. Eleanor Jackson emanates quiet authority. Departing passengers from Flight 923 pause to watch the scene unfolding, many still recording with their phones. The story of what transpired aboard the flight has already begun spreading throughout the terminal, drawing additional attention. Thomas Bradford steps forward, addressing the small crowd with professional courtesy. Please allow Dr. Jackson and her granddaughter some privacy. If you have questions or concerns about today's events, Horizon Airways representatives are available at the customer service desk. Eleanor raises a hand, indicating she wishes to speak. The gesture immediately commands attention, silencing the murmurs and creating a space of respectful expectation. I appreciate your concern, she begins, her voice carrying without strain. But I believe transparency serves us better than privacy in moments like this. She surveys the gathered faces, flight crew members, gate agents, passengers, airport staff, with thoughtful consideration. When she continues, her words are measured and deliberate. For 35 years, I've built Horizon Airways on a foundation of dignity and respect for every passenger. What happened today, the treatment my granddaughter and I received, represents a failure of those values. Not just by one individual, but by systems that allowed such behavior to persist. Eleanor places a protective hand on Zoe's shoulder. My granddaughter was excited for her first flight experience. Instead, she received a different lesson about the reality many people face when traveling, when shopping, when simply existing in spaces others believe they don't belong. Several onlookers nod in recognition, particularly people of color who have experienced similar treatment in their own lives. I regularly fly my airline incognito, Eleanor continues. Not as a gotcha moment, but because I genuinely want to understand the passenger experience exactly as it is, not as a sanitized version prepared for the CEO's observation. She glances towards Sofia Martinez, who stands nearby with professional composure. What I witnessed today requires a response that goes beyond addressing one employee's behavior. It demands that we examine every aspect of our training, our oversight, our accountability systems. Eleanor's voice carries no anger, only resolute determination. This isn't about punishing individuals. It's about protecting our passengers and living our values consistently. It's about ensuring that the next family who boards our aircraft receives the respect they deserve, regardless of how they look or what they wear. From the gathered crowd, an elderly black woman steps forward. Dr. Jackson, I've been flying since the segregation era. What you're doing matters. It really matters. Eleanor acknowledges this with a respectful nod. Change happens incrementally, through countless individual choices to stand for what's right. Today, many people made those choices. Passengers who documented mistreatment, crew members who showed kindness despite pressure to conform, executives who responded swiftly when alerted. She pauses, her expression thoughtful. But many others remain silent witnesses. I understand that silence, the discomfort of confrontation, the uncertainty about whether to intervene. Yet progress requires us to move beyond that comfort zone, to speak up when we observe injustice, even when it's difficult. The crowd has grown larger now, with airport staff and passengers from other flights pausing to listen to this impromptu address from one of aviation's most respected leaders. Horizon Airways will use this incident as a catalyst for improvement, Eleanor promises. Not through punitive measures alone, but through enhanced training, clearer accountability, and a renewed commitment to our founding values. She gestures towards Zoe, who stands tall despite her small stature. My granddaughter taught me something important today. When she witnessed unfairness, her immediate instinct wasn't anger or retaliation, it was documentation. She understood intuitively that truth, properly recorded, creates the foundation for meaningful change. Zoe looks up at her grandmother with evident pride, absorbing this public recognition of her wisdom. To our passengers, our employees, and the public, Eleanor continues, I make this commitment Horizon Airways will emerge from this incident stronger, more vigilant, and more deeply aligned with our core values. The journey of improvement never ends. We simply become more determined travelers on that path. As she concludes her remarks, spontaneous applause erupts from the gathered crowd. It's not just approval they're expressing, but recognition of authentic leadership, the rare willingness to acknowledge failure openly and commit to growth rather than defensiveness. Michael Ramirez approaches hesitantly, still in his flight attendant uniform. Dr. Jackson, he says, his voice carrying emotion. Many of us try every day to uphold the values you established. What happened today doesn't represent all of us. I know that, Mr. Ramirez, Eleanor acknowledges warmly. Your kindness toward my granddaughter spoke volumes. It's precisely why I believe in Horizon's capacity to address this failing and emerge stronger. A reporter from the San Francisco Chronicle, attracted by the gathering, calls out a question. Dr. Jackson, will the flight attendant who discriminated against you be terminated? Eleanor responds with characteristic thoughtfulness. Personnel matters will be handled according to our established policies, with full due process. This isn't about punishing one individual. It's about improving our entire system to prevent such incidents in the future. It's 1:57 p.m. Eleanor has transformed what could have been merely a disciplinary incident into a teaching moment about leadership, accountability, and systemic change. Her response demonstrates the principles that built Horizon Airways from a single leased aircraft to an industry leader, address problems directly, acknowledge failure without defensiveness, and focus on improvement rather than blame. As the crowd disperses, Janelle Jackson approaches, embracing her mother and daughter with visible relief. Mom, Zoe, I'm so sorry you had to experience this. Eleanor smiles reassuringly. Don't be sorry. Be determined. This is how progress happens, not through comfort, but through confronting reality and committing to change. Zoe looks up at her mother and grandmother, her expression thoughtful beyond her years. My grandma built this airline, she says simply, echoing the statement that had so confused Rebecca Whitfield hours earlier. But now the words carry new meaning, not just a claim about ownership, but a declaration about values, vision, and the courage to stand for both. Rebecca's removal. The Horizon Airways administrative offices at San Francisco International Airport maintain a careful professional atmosphere despite the tension of the current situation. Rebecca Whitfield sits rigidly in a conference room, facing Sophia Martinez and Human Resources Director James Wilson. Security personnel remain positioned discreetly outside the door. Rebecca's earlier confidence has evaporated completely, replaced by a pallor that accentuates the lines of stress on her face. Her hands rest on the table, occasionally trembling despite her evident efforts to appear composed. Ms. Whitfield, Sophia begins formally, this preliminary meeting is to document the events of Flight 923 and initiate the investigative process according to Horizon Airways employee conduct protocols. James activates a recording device, stating the date, time, and participants for the record. This is not a disciplinary hearing, he clarifies. That will occur after our investigation is complete. You'll have full opportunity to present your perspective, with union representation if you choose. Rebecca nods numbly, her eyes fixed on the tabletop. I understand. Sophia opens a tablet, reviewing information with clinical detachment. We've received 7 separate passenger complaints regarding your conduct toward Dr. Eleanor Jackson and her granddaughter. Additionally, we have video documentation from multiple sources showing differential treatment based on perceived racial and socioeconomic status. She turns the tablet to display a compilation of footage, Zoe's recordings, Morgan Taylor's videos, and clips from other passengers, all showing Rebecca's pattern of behavior throughout the flight. Would you like to provide an initial statement regarding these incidents? James asks. Rebecca stares at the video evidence, watching herself through others' eyes for perhaps the first time. Her voice, when she finally speaks, is barely audible. If I had known who she was, Sophia interrupts with quiet firmness. That's precisely the problem, Ms. Whitfield. Our service standards apply equally to all passengers, regardless of status. The fact that you would have treated Dr. Jackson differently had you recognized her contradicts our fundamental values. Rebecca flinches at the truth in this statement. I was just maintaining standards. She attempts weakly. First class has certain expectations. Yes, it does. Sophia agrees. Expectations of exceptional service for all passengers who hold valid tickets, regardless of appearance, race, or perceived status. James consults his notes. Your personnel file contains 7 previous complaints of similar conduct toward passengers of color, all dismissed by your former supervisor as misunderstandings. Rebecca's expression shifts toward defensiveness. Those passengers were being difficult. They didn't understand proper etiquette for premium cabins. Or perhaps, Sophia suggests evenly, you made assumptions about their belonging based on appearance rather than their actual ticket status. The observation lands with visible impact. Rebecca's defensive posture falters as realization begins to penetrate. I was just doing my job the way I was trained, she insists, though with diminishing conviction. That's an area we'll be investigating as well. James acknowledges. If your training or supervision contributed to these behaviors, that represents a systemic issue requiring address. Outside the conference room, Eleanor Jackson approaches with Sophia and Thomas. Having completed her public remarks, she pauses, observing Rebecca through the glass wall with thoughtful consideration. Would you like to speak with her? Thomas asks quietly. Eleanor considers the question carefully. No, she decides after a moment. This isn't about me personally. It's about our systems and values. My presence would make it seem like an individual grievance rather than an institutional concern. Thomas nods in understanding. What would you like us to convey on your behalf? Eleanor's response reflects her leadership philosophy. Tell her that how she treated us today isn't acceptable for any passenger, regardless of who they are, but also ensure she understands that this process will be fair, thorough, and focused on improvement rather than punishment for its own sake. Back in the conference room, Sophia informs Rebecca of the next steps. You are suspended with pay pending investigation. Your flight privileges are temporarily revoked, and we'll arrange ground transportation to your home. The formal investigation will begin tomorrow, and you'll be notified of all proceedings in advance. Rebecca finally asks the question clearly weighing on her mind. Will I lose my job? Sophia doesn't offer false reassurance. The investigation will determine appropriate consequences. But I must be clear. What we've documented today represents a fundamental breach of our most essential principles. The outcome will reflect that reality. As security prepares to escort Rebecca from the building, she makes one last attempt at explanation. I've given 16 years to this airline. I've received commendations for service excellence from certain passengers. James clarifies gently. The question we must investigate is whether that excellence extended equally to all. Rebecca has no response to this. As she's led toward the exit, her posture conveys the dawning recognition of someone seeing their own behavior through a new lens, perhaps for the first time understanding how her standards appeared to those on the receiving end. At 2:05 p.m., as Rebecca Whitfield exits the Horizon Airways administrative offices, she passes Michael Ramirez in the hallway. Their eyes meet briefly, her expression haunted, his conflicted. No words are exchanged, but the moment encapsulates the reckoning occurring within Horizon Airways, 2 approaches to service, 2 interpretations of the company's values, 2 very different futures in the organization. The removal has been handled with professional restraint, no public humiliation, no excessive drama, simply clear accountability applied with dignity. It reflects Eleanor Jackson's leadership philosophy that addressing failure doesn't require destroying people, only insisting they face the consequences of their choices with opportunity for growth and change. As Rebecca disappears through the exit doors, Sophia turns to Thomas with renewed resolve. We need to examine every aspect of our training, oversight, and accountability systems. This isn't just about one flight attendant. Thomas nods in agreement. Eleanor's right. This is a systems failure as much as an individual one. The question isn't just how Rebecca developed these attitudes, but how our organization allowed them to persist unchecked for 16 years. Their exchange captures the essence of true organizational accountability, looking beyond individual behavior to the structures that enable it, addressing root causes rather than merely symptoms, and viewing incidents not as isolated failures, but as opportunities for comprehensive improvement. In this way, Rebecca's removal becomes not just the conclusion of an unfortunate incident, but the beginning of a more profound transformation within Horizon Airways, one that will ultimately strengthen the company's alignment with the values upon which Eleanor Jackson founded it 35 years earlier. Immediate aftermath. The VIP lounge at San Francisco International Airport offers a quiet sanctuary from the bustling terminal. Janelle Jackson embraces her mother and daughter warmly, her professional composure momentarily set aside in favor of family connection. "I'm so sorry this happened," she says, examining both for signs of distress, especially on Zoe's first flight experience. Eleanor smiles reassuringly. The measure of an organization isn't whether problems occur, it's how they're addressed when they do. Zoe, having regained her earlier excitement now that the tension has dissipated, bounces on her toes. "Mom, I recorded everything like Ms. Peterson taught us in social studies about documenting injustice." Janelle kneels to her daughter's level, her expression a mixture of pride and sadness. "That was very brave and smart, sweetie. I just wish you hadn't needed to do it." "But that's how change happens," Zoe replies, echoing her grandmother's wisdom with childish directness. "Grandma said so." Eleanor exchanges a meaningful glance with her daughter. At 9, Zoe is already absorbing the family's core values: dignity, accountability, and the courage to stand for both. Thomas Bradford enters the lounge, tablet in hand, his expression professionally composed but with underlying urgency. "Dr. Jackson, we're seeing significant social media traction. Morgan Taylor's initial tweets have gained over 87,000 retweets in the last hour." He displays the screen, showing various posts with the hashtag Horizon Humiliation trending nationally. Videos from the flight have begun circulating widely, along with clips of Eleanor's impromptu address at the gate. "Our communications team has released a prepared statement acknowledging the incident and affirming our zero-tolerance policy for discrimination. We've also emphasized the immediate action taken and ongoing investigation." Eleanor reviews the statement with thoughtful consideration. "Add a personal message from me," she decides. "Something direct about experiencing this incident firsthand and my commitment that it drives meaningful change in our service culture." As Thomas makes notes, Sofia Martinez joins them, bringing news of Rebecca's administrative processing. She's been suspended with pay pending investigation. Per protocol, the union has been notified, and we've arranged transportation home for her. "And how did she seem?" Eleanor asks, interested less in punishment than in potential for growth. Sofia considers the question carefully. "Shocked, certainly defensive initially, but then increasingly subdued as the evidence was presented. I believe she's beginning to understand the magnitude of her actions, though true accountability may take longer to develop." "Keep me updated," Eleanor requests. "Not for involvement in the process, that should proceed according to established protocols, but because I want to understand the full context of how this situation developed." The lounge door opens as Michael Ramirez is escorted in by security. Looking uncertain about his unexpected summons to the VIP area, he stands at attention, his uniform impeccable despite the long flight. "Mr. Ramirez," Eleanor greets him warmly. "Please join us." Michael approaches with evident nervousness. "Dr. Jackson, I want to apologize again for what happened. I should have intervened more directly." Eleanor raises a hand gently. "You showed kindness and professionalism throughout the flight. That deserves recognition, not apology." Sofia nods in agreement. "We've reviewed the passenger statements. Multiple accounts specifically mention your efforts to provide proper service, despite the challenging dynamics." "I was just doing my job," Michael responds modestly. "That's precisely the point," Eleanor emphasizes. "You understood that your job is to serve all passengers with dignity and respect. That understanding is what we need throughout our organization." Thomas makes a note on his tablet. "We'd like you to participate in the development of our enhanced service training. Your perspective would be valuable as we revise our protocols." Michael's surprise is evident. "Me, but I'm just a regular flight attendant." "There's nothing just about doing the right thing when it would have been easier to do otherwise," Eleanor observes. "That's the perspective we need most." As Michael processes this unexpected recognition, a Horizon Airways communications specialist enters with urgent news. "Dr. Jackson, media requests are pouring in. CBS, CNN, MSNBC, and Fox News have all requested interviews about today's incident. Eleanor considers this development thoughtfully. Prepare a single statement emphasizing our commitment to addressing both the specific incident and the systemic issues it revealed. Decline individual interviews for now. This shouldn't become a media spectacle about me personally. She turns to Thomas. What matters now is the follow-through. I want a comprehensive action plan on my desk or within 48 hours. Training revisions, accountability structures, enhanced feedback mechanisms, everything we need to ensure this doesn't happen again. As the executives disperse to implement these directives, Eleanor returns her attention to family. Now, she says with a warm smile toward Zoe, I believe someone was promised a special grandmother-granddaughter day in San Francisco. Zoe's face brightens immediately. Can we still go to the Science Museum and get ice cream at Ghirardelli Square? Absolutely, boss, Eleanor confirms, though. Today taught us an important lesson about standing up for what's right, but it also reminded us to treasure the joyful moments that make life meaningful. As they prepare to leave the airport, Eleanor pauses to send one final message to the executive team. Remember, our response to today's failure will define us more clearly than the failure itself. Let's ensure it reflects who we truly aspire to be. It's 2:30 p.m. The immediate crisis has been addressed with professionalism and clarity. What remains now is the more challenging work of translating this moment into lasting change throughout Horizon Airways culture and operations. Eleanor Jackson, founder and CEO, has demonstrated leadership not through dominance or vindictiveness, but through principled action and systematic thinking. In doing so, she's transformed what could have been merely an unfortunate incident into an opportunity for meaningful growth for her company, her employees, and the travelers who trust Horizon Airways to carry them safely and respectfully to their destinations. Company response. The Horizon Airways executive boardroom buzzes with urgent purpose. 24 hours after the incident on Flight 923, Eleanor Jackson presides over an emergency leadership meeting. Department heads from operations, human resources, training, customer experience, and legal sit around the polished conference table, each with tablets displaying preliminary reports and proposed action items. Thank you all for adjusting your schedules on short notice. Eleanor begins, her tone businesslike, but with an underlying gravity. Yesterday's incident has revealed gaps between our stated values and operational reality. Today, we begin the process of closing those gaps systematically. On the wall-mounted screens, data from the past 24 hours tells a compelling story. Social media mentions up 847%. Customer service inquiries increased by 312%, and reservation cancellations are showing a concerning 18% spike since the incident began trending online. Thomas Bradford presents the initial findings from their rapid response investigation. We've identified several critical failure points. First, Rebecca Whitfield's previous complaints were consistently dismissed by her former supervisor, Harold Munson, who retired last year. His notes consistently characterized concerns as passenger misunderstandings rather than service failures. Sophia Martinez continues. Second, our performance evaluation metrics prioritized efficiency and technical compliance over consistent application of our non-discrimination policies. Flight attendants received higher ratings for rapid service delivery than for equitable treatment. And third, adds James Wilson from Human Resources, our anonymous reporting system wasn't truly anonymous. Crew members could often identify reporters based on flight details, creating a chilling effect on internal accountability. Eleanor listens attentively, occasionally making notes on her tablet. When the initial findings conclude, she addresses the room with characteristic directness. These findings suggest this wasn't just about one employee's bias. It was about systems that failed to identify, address, and correct discriminatory behavior. That's on us, on leadership. She stands, moving to the center of the room with deliberate purpose. I founded this airline 35 years ago with a vision of travel that respects the dignity of every passenger. Yesterday, I experienced firsthand how far we've drifted from that vision in some areas of our operation. The executives shift uncomfortably, aware of the magnitude of this failure, not just as a PR challenge, but as a fundamental breach of their founder's core philosophy. This isn't about damage control, Eleanor continues firmly. It's about recommitting to our founding principles and building systems that ensure they're upheld consistently. She turns to the Chief Operating Officer, David Chen. David, I want a comprehensive review of all customer-facing training, everything from initial onboarding to recurrent certification. How are we teaching our values? How are we measuring their application? Where are the gaps? Chen nods, already making notes. We'll have preliminary findings within 72 hours. Comprehensive report in 2 weeks. Eleanor turns to legal and HR. I want a complete overhaul of our complaint processing system, true anonymity for internal reports, transparent tracking of resolution, independent review of discrimination allegations, rather than routing them through direct supervisors who may have conflicts of interest. James Wilson responds promptly. We'll develop new protocols by end of week. Implementation plan within 15 days. Eleanor continues methodically addressing each department, assigning clear deliverables with specific timelines. The meeting transforms from crisis response to strategic planning, focused not just on addressing the immediate incident, but on systemic improvement across the organization. Now, Eleanor says, after the departmental assignments are complete, to the matter of Rebecca Whitfield. The room grows quieter, executives attentive to how their founder will handle this specific case. The investigation will proceed according to our established protocols, with union representation and full due process. But I want to be clear about something fundamental. This isn't about punishing one individual. It's about upholding standards that protect both our passengers and our company's integrity. She pauses, considering her next words carefully. If the investigation confirms what we've seen in the preliminary evidence, appropriate consequences must follow, not out of vindictiveness, but because accountability matters. How we handle this specific case will send a message throughout our organization about whether our values are merely aspirational or truly operational. The executives nod in understanding. Eleanor has always led with this balance, compassion for individuals combined with unwavering commitment to principles. Finally, she concludes, I want a public commitment to improvement, not generic corporate promises, but specific, measurable initiatives with transparent reporting on outcomes. Our customers deserve to know exactly how we're addressing this failure. Sofia Martinez presents a draft of Horizon Airways' public statement, which Eleanor reviews thoughtfully before suggesting revisions to strengthen the accountability language and specificity of commitments. The final version, approved for immediate release, reads, Yesterday, Horizon Airways failed to uphold our core value of dignity for all passengers. As founder and CEO, I experienced this failure firsthand while traveling with my granddaughter. What occurred was unacceptable and contradicts everything we stand for as an organization. Effective immediately, we are implementing the following changes. Comprehensive review and enhancement of all customer service training, with specific emphasis on equitable treatment, restructured complaint, processing system with independent review of all discrimination allegations, enhanced anonymous reporting mechanisms for both passengers and employees to identify concerns, mandatory refresher training on inclusive service for all customer-facing staff, revised performance metrics that prioritize equitable treatment alongside efficiency. We will report publicly on our progress in these areas over the coming months. Horizon Airways was founded on the principle that every passenger deserves respect and dignity. Yesterday, we failed to live that principle. Today, we commit to the hard work of ensuring such failure never occurs again. Eleanor Jackson, founder and CEO. The statement is released at 5:30 p.m., exactly 24 hours after Flight 923 landed in San Francisco. Within minutes, it's been shared thousands of times across social media platforms, with reactions ranging from skepticism to appreciation for its directness and specific commitments. Industry analysts note the unusual approach, a CEO taking personal responsibility without deflection or corporate jargon, acknowledging failure while committing to measurable improvement rather than vague promises. This response demonstrates why Eleanor Jackson has maintained her position as one of aviation's most respected leaders. Comments industry expert Maria Chen on CNN's business segment. She's treating this as a systems issue requiring structural change, not just a PR problem to manage. As the executive meeting concludes, Eleanor offers a final thought to her leadership team. Yesterday was difficult and uncomfortable, but discomfort often precedes growth. If we respond to this failure with genuine commitment to improvement, Horizon Airways will emerge stronger, more aligned with our values, and better equipped to serve all our passengers with the dignity they deserve. The stock price, which had dipped 4.7% at market opening, begins to recover as investors respond to the company's transparent and substantive approach to the crisis. By market close, it's down only 1.2%, a sign that Eleanor's leadership has begun to restore confidence in Horizon Airways' direction and values. This isn't merely crisis management, it's transformational leadership, using a failure as catalyst for meaningful change rather than merely minimizing damage or deflecting responsibility. It's the approach that built Horizon Airways from a single leased aircraft to an industry leader, and it's the approach that will guide its response to this defining moment. Social media impact. By the morning after Flight 923, the story of Eleanor Jackson's experience has exploded across digital platforms. The hashtag dignity in the skies has largely replaced the earlier hashtag Horizon humiliation, reflecting a shift from outrage to constructive conversation about travel experiences for passengers of color. Zoe's video, released with Eleanor's permission but with faces blurred to protect privacy, has reached 3.7 million views across platforms. The clip showing Rebecca Whitfield's dismissive "You people don't belong here" comment has been isolated and shared widely as emblematic of the subtle discrimination many travelers experience. Morgan Taylor's original tweet has accumulated over 248,000 retweets and sparked a broader conversation about traveling while Black experiences. Her thread documenting the incident has been cited by major news outlets from CNN to the Washington Post. What began as documenting discrimination became witnessing justice. Morgan writes in a viral follow-up post, "Dr. Jackson's response was masterful, addressing the incident with dignity rather than revenge, focusing on systemic improvement rather than just individual punishment. The conversation has expanded beyond Horizon Airways specifically to address industry-wide issues. Travelers share their own experiences of being questioned about belonging in first class, receiving differential service, or facing subtle and not-so-subtle assumptions about their status based on appearance. I'm a platinum member with over 1 million miles flown, and I still get asked if I'm in the right line for priority boarding. Hashtag dignity in the skies. Flight attendant assumed I was traveling with the white family seated next to me rather than believing I had my own first-class ticket. Happens every time. Hashtag dignity in the skies. Eleanor Jackson experiencing this on her own airline proves how pervasive this problem is. If it happens to a billionaire CEO, imagine what regular folks face. Hashtag dignity in the skies. Industry publications have picked up the story, focusing on Eleanor's methodical response as a case study in crisis management and leadership. Aviation Weekly's headline reads, "Jackson transforms service failure into catalyst for change at Horizon Airways." Travel blogs and industry analysts debate whether Horizon's comprehensive response will influence practices at other airlines. Several major carriers have issued statements reaffirming their own non-discrimination policies, though none match the specific commitments outlined in Eleanor's public statement. The industry is watching Horizon closely, notes travel industry analyst James Peterson on his popular podcast. If their enhanced training and accountability measures produce measurable improvements in customer satisfaction and complaint reduction, we'll likely see similar approaches adopted by competitors. Civil rights organizations have reached out to Horizon Airways with offers to assist in developing more inclusive service training. The National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, NAACP, has praised Eleanor's response while noting that the incident reflects broader patterns of discrimination in travel and hospitality industries. By the next morning, Eleanor Jackson's personal social media accounts have received thousands of supportive messages. She responds with a single, thoughtful post. "Thank you for the overwhelming support following yesterday's incident. While uncomfortable, this experience has reinforced my commitment to creating travel experiences where everyone is treated with equal dignity and respect." The real measure of Horizon Airways won't be this single incident, but how effectively we transform it into lasting improvement. Hashtag dignity in the skies isn't just a hashtag, it's our renewed commitment to every passenger who trusts us with their journey. The post generates another wave of positive engagement, with many praising Eleanor's focus on improvement rather than defensiveness or blame. Meanwhile, Reddit threads analyze the incident from multiple perspectives, with former flight attendants offering insider context about service culture and training gaps. Several commenters who identify as Horizon Airways employees express both embarrassment about the incident and pride in their CEO's response. "I've worked for Horizon for 12 years, writes one anonymous employee. Dr. Jackson has always emphasized dignity as our core value. What happened on that flight doesn't represent most of us, but it does show we have work to do in ensuring our values are consistently applied." The conversation has expanded to include discussion of performance diversity, companies that project inclusive values in marketing and mission statements while failing to embed those values in operational practices and accountability systems. "This isn't just about one flight attendant or one airline," notes social justice educator Amara Williams in a widely shared LinkedIn article. "It's about the gap between stated values and lived experience that many organizations struggle with." Eleanor Jackson's response is noteworthy because it acknowledges that gap directly and commits to closing it through structural change rather than superficial messaging. By the third day after the incident, the conversation has evolved from documenting a single discriminatory event to examining systemic issues across the travel industry. Aviation consultants report increased requests from airlines for training reviews and service culture assessments, evidence that Horizon's public reckoning has triggered industry-wide reflection. The digital response to Flight 923 demonstrates how a single incident, properly documented and addressed, can catalyze meaningful conversation about deeper societal patterns. What might once have remained an isolated, unaddressed instance of discriminatory treatment has instead become a powerful case study in accountability, leadership, and systematic improvement, all because a 9-year-old girl decided to document injustice when she witnessed it. 1 week later, the Horizon Airways headquarters in San Francisco hums with purposeful energy. 1 week after the incident on Flight 923, the executive boardroom hosts representatives from across the organization for the official launch of the company's new Dignity Assurance program. Eleanor Jackson stands at the head of the table, reviewing final details with Sophia Martinez and Thomas Bradford before the full presentation begins. The wall displays show real-time metrics from the past week, customer feedback data, social media sentiment analysis, and preliminary results from enhanced service monitoring. "Good morning, everyone." Eleanor begins as the room settles. "Today marks an important milestone in Horizon Airways' evolution. While I wish it hadn't required the catalyst of last week's incident, I'm encouraged by the thoughtful, comprehensive response you've developed in such a short time." Thomas activates the main presentation screen, displaying the Dignity Assurance Program logo, a simple, elegant design incorporating the company's wing symbol with the word dignity prominently featured. "The Dignity Assurance Program represents our renewed commitment to equitable, respectful service for every passenger," he explains. "It includes 5 core components, each with specific metrics, accountability measures, and transparent reporting." Sophia continues, outlining the program elements. "First, enhanced training for all customer-facing staff, with specific modules on recognizing and addressing unconscious bias. Second, revised service protocols that standardize interactions to prevent differential treatment. Third, an independent review board for all discrimination complaints, composed of both company representatives and outside civil rights experts." The presentation continues with details of the 4th component, anonymous reporting systems for both passengers and employees. And the 5th, revised performance metrics that prioritize equitable treatment alongside efficiency and technical compliance. Implementation begins today, Eleanor confirms. All flight crews will complete the initial training module before their next scheduled flight. Customer-facing ground staff will complete training by end of week. Management training follows next week. James Wilson from Human Resources provides an update on the investigation into Rebecca Whitfield's conduct. The formal review has been completed, following all appropriate protocols and with full union representation. Based on comprehensive evidence from multiple sources, Ms. Whitfield's employment with Horizon Airways has been terminated, effective immediately. There's no celebration at this announcement, only solemn acknowledgement of a necessary consequence. Eleanor has emphasized throughout the process that the goal isn't punishment, but accountability and improvement. Ms. Whitfield has been offered the option to complete our new inclusivity training program at company expense, should she wish to enhance her future employment opportunities elsewhere, James adds, reflecting Eleanor's belief in the possibility of growth even after significant failure. The meeting transitions to reports from various departments on their implementation plans. Michael Ramirez, recently promoted to training specialist based on his exemplary conduct during the incident, presents the new service protocols developed with input from diversity consultants and civil rights organizations. These guidelines maintain our premium service standards while ensuring consistent application regardless of passenger appearance or background. He explains, "We've eliminated subjective judgment calls that can be influenced by bias, replacing them with clear, equitable standards for all interactions." As the presentation concludes, Eleanor addresses the team once more. "I want to acknowledge the extraordinary effort everyone has put forth this week. You've transformed a difficult moment into an opportunity for meaningful improvement, and that reflects the best of Horizon Airways' culture." She pauses, her expression thoughtful. "But our work is just beginning. The true measure of this program won't be today's announcement, but its sustained implementation in the weeks, months, and years ahead. Dignity isn't a project with a completion date. It's a continuous commitment we must uphold in every interaction, every day." Later that afternoon, Eleanor hosts a press conference to announce the Dignity Assurance Program. Publicly, journalists from major news outlets, industry publications, and travel blogs gather in the Horizon Airways Media Center, where Eleanor stands at the podium with Sophia Martinez and Thomas Bradford flanking her. "1 week ago, I experienced discriminatory treatment while traveling incognito on my own airline," she begins, addressing the assembled reporters with characteristic directness. "Today, I'm announcing Horizon Airways' comprehensive response to that incident, not just addressing individual behavior, but transforming our entire approach to ensuring dignity for every passenger." She outlines the 5 components of the Dignity Assurance Program, emphasizing both the structural changes and the measurable outcomes that will be reported publicly on a quarterly basis. "We've established an independent review board to evaluate our progress," she explains. "This board includes representatives from civil rights organizations, travel advocacy groups, and diversity experts who will hold us accountable to our commitments." When the floor opens for questions, Eleanor responds with candid, thoughtful answers that avoid corporate jargon or defensive positioning. Yes, what happened was painful. She acknowledges when asked about her personal experience. But transformative change often begins with uncomfortable moments that reveal where we've fallen short of our own standards. The measure of Horizon Airways won't be whether we experienced a failure, but how effectively we've used that failure as a catalyst for meaningful improvement. The press conference generates positive coverage, with analysts praising the specific, measurable commitments rather than the vague promises typical of corporate responses to public relations challenges. That evening, Eleanor visits Janelle and Zoe at their San Francisco home. As they share dinner, Zoe proudly displays a project she's created for her social studies class, a presentation titled "How Documentation Creates Change," featuring her experience on Flight 923 as a central case study. "Ms. Peterson says I can present it to the whole school at assembly," Zoe announces excitedly. "She says it's important for kids to understand how they can make a difference." Eleanor smiles with genuine pride. "You certainly made a difference, sweetheart. Your courage in documenting what happened has helped thousands of people who fly on our planes. Will the mean flight attendant ever understand what she did wrong?" Zoe asks with the direct curiosity of childhood. Eleanor considers their question thoughtfully. "I hope so. Sometimes people need time and distance to truly see the impact of their actions, but whether or not she understands, the important thing is that her behavior helped us recognize problems we needed to fix." Janelle raises her glass in a toast. "To my amazing daughter and remarkable mother, 2 generations of women who know that dignity matters and have the courage to stand for it." As they clink glasses, Eleanor reflects on the journey of the past week, from a moment of discrimination to a comprehensive program for change, from a child's instinctive documentation to an industry-wide conversation about equitable treatment. 1 week after Flight 923, Horizon Airways has transformed a potential crisis into an opportunity for meaningful growth, demonstrating that the measure of an organization isn't the absence of failures, but the courage and integrity with which those failures are addressed. 2 weeks later, Michael Ramirez stands before 30 flight attendants in Horizon Airways' New York training facility. His recent promotion to training specialist is evident in both his confident posture and the company's new Dignity Assurance Program materials arranged neatly on the podium before him. "Welcome to our enhanced service training," he begins. "Today, we're focusing on ensuring consistent, respectful service for every passenger, regardless of appearance, background, or how they obtained their ticket." On the screen behind him, Zoe's video from Flight 923 plays silently. The face is blurred, but the differential treatment clearly visible. The training room is quiet as attendants observe the documented discrimination, many shifting uncomfortably in their seats. "This happened on our airline 2 weeks ago," Michael acknowledges directly. "We're not showing this to shame anyone, but because acknowledging reality is the first step toward improvement." He advances to the next slide, displaying Eleanor Jackson's statement about the incident and Horizon's commitment to change. "Our CEO experienced this treatment firsthand. Rather than simply disciplining one employee, she recognized it as a symptom of systemic issues that we all have responsibility to address." The training proceeds with interactive scenarios, role-playing exercises, and discussion of unconscious bias in service interactions. Flight attendants practice standardized greetings, equitable distribution of premium amenities, and consistent application of policies across all passenger demographics. "The goal isn't to eliminate your judgment," Michael emphasizes, "but to ensure that judgment is based on passenger behavior rather than appearance or assumptions." Meanwhile, in Chicago, Thomas Bradford leads a similar session with airport customer service representatives, focusing on equitable treatment during check-in, boarding, and gate operations. "We've revised our metrics," he explains to the assembled staff. "Previously, efficiency was the primary measurement of success. Now, equitable treatment carries equal weight in performance evaluations." He displays the new feedback system being implemented at all gates and check-in counters, simple digital interfaces allowing passengers to rate their experience with specific attention to whether they felt it respected and valued during interactions. These ratings will be anonymized but analyzed by demographic to identify patterns, Thomas explains. "This allows us to address systematic disparities rather than just individual complaints." In San Francisco, Eleanor Jackson meets with the newly formed Independent Review Board, composed of civil rights experts, travel advocacy representatives, and diversity consultants. They're reviewing preliminary data from the first 2 weeks of the Dignity Assurance Program. Implementation. "Early feedback is encouraging," notes Dr. Amara Williams, a renowned social justice educator serving on the board. "But the real test will be sustained improvement over months and years, not just the initial response to public attention." Eleanor agrees. "That's precisely why we've established this independent board, to hold us accountable beyond the current news cycle. Meaningful change requires ongoing vigilance and transparency." The board discusses early implementation challenges, including resistance from some long-tenured employees accustomed to greater discretion in service decisions. They review the anonymous reporting data, noting that 7 incidents of potential discrimination have been reported through the new system in just 2 weeks, incidents that might previously have gone unaddressed. "Each report is being thoroughly investigated," Eleanor confirms, "and we're identifying patterns to guide further training refinements." Later that afternoon, Eleanor receives an unexpected letter forwarded through Horizon's Human Resources Department. The return address shows it's from Rebecca Whitfield. Eleanor opens it with thoughtful curiosity. "Dr. Jackson, I've spent the past 2 weeks reflecting on my behavior during Flight 923. While my initial response was defensive, I can no longer avoid facing the reality of my actions as documented in the videos and passenger statements. The training materials Horizon offered have helped me recognize patterns in my service approach that I previously justified as maintaining standards, but can now see reflected discriminatory assumptions about who belongs in premium cabins. I'm not writing to request reinstatement. The termination was appropriate given my conduct. I'm writing because acknowledging harm is the first step toward growth, and because your granddaughter deserves to know that her brave documentation created an opportunity for someone to learn and change, with sincere regret and appreciation for the difficult lessons. Rebecca Whitfield." Eleanor reads the letter twice, noting its sincerity and absence of excuses. She drafts a brief, thoughtful response. "Ms. Whitfield, thank you for your candid acknowledgement. Growth often begins with uncomfortable recognition of our own shortcomings, and your willingness to face yours directly speaks well of your character and potential. While our professional relationship has concluded, I believe your reflection demonstrates the possibility of positive change, even from difficult circumstances. I appreciate your specific acknowledgement of my granddaughter's role in this process. Documentation created accountability, which has now led to genuine reflection. I wish you well in your future endeavors and hope this experience serves as a foundation for personal and professional growth. Sincerely, Eleanor Jackson. That evening, Eleanor joins a video call with airline industry leaders who have requested insights on Horizon's approach to addressing service disparities. CEOs from 3 major carriers participate, along with operational executives from several others. What made your response different, notes United CEO, was the immediate focus on systemic improvement rather than just managing the PR crisis. That's resonated strongly with both customers and industry observers. Eleanor shares the framework of the Dignity Assurance Program, emphasizing the importance of measurable outcomes and transparent reporting. The aviation industry has long struggled with balancing efficiency and humanity. She observes, this approach allows us to measure both with equal rigor. Several airlines express interest in adopting similar programs, particularly the Anonymous Reporting System and Independent Review Board. Eleanor offers to share Horizon's implementation materials, noting, this isn't about competitive advantage, it's about industry-wide improvement in how we serve all passengers. The industry publication Aviation Weekly features a cover story titled, The Jackson Method Transforming Service Culture Through Accountability and Transparency. The article details how Horizon's response to the Flight 923 incident has triggered a broader reassessment of service standards across multiple airlines. 2 weeks after the incident, what began as a discriminatory interaction captured by a 9-year-old's phone has evolved into an industry-wide conversation about equitable service, systemic accountability, and the gap between stated values and operational reality. In Zoe's classroom in New York, her social studies presentation receives enthusiastic attention from classmates and teachers alike. She concludes with wisdom beyond her years. My grandma says dignity isn't something you can take from someone. It's something they choose to maintain regardless of how others behave. But respect is something we all deserve. And sometimes we need to document when it's missing so things can change. Ms. Peterson writes on her evaluation, extraordinary real-world application of our lessons on documentation and social justice. Zoe demonstrates remarkable understanding of how individual actions can create systemic change. The ripple effects of Flight 923 continue to expand, touching not just Horizon Airways, but the broader aviation industry, and not just corporate policies, but individual lives. From flight attendants receiving enhanced training to a 9-year-old understanding her power to document truth and create change. 6 months later, the grand ballroom of the San Francisco Fairmont Hotel gleams with elegant decor as Horizon Airways celebrates its 35th anniversary. Industry leaders, government officials, and company employees from across the globe have gathered for this milestone event. Crystal chandeliers cast warm light over tables adorned with the company's signature blue and silver arrangements. On stage, Eleanor Jackson stands at the podium, her presence commanding despite her modest stature. At 71, she radiates the quiet confidence of someone whose vision has been thoroughly vindicated by time and results. 35 years ago, she begins, I leased a single aircraft with a simple mission to create an airline where every passenger would be treated with equal dignity and respect. Tonight, as we celebrate how far we've come, I want to introduce someone who recently reminded us how vigilantly we must guard that founding vision. She gestures toward the side of the stage. Please welcome my granddaughter, Zoe Jackson. Zoe walks confidently to join her grandmother, no longer the nervous child from Flight 923, but a poised 9-year-old whose actions help transform an entire company. She wears a deep purple dress with her signature light-up sneakers, formal enough for the occasion while maintaining her unique personality. The audience applauds warmly as grandmother and granddaughter stand together at the podium. 6 months ago, Eleanor continues, Zoe taught us all a powerful lesson about accountability and courage when she documented discriminatory treatment on one of our flights. Her simple act of truth-telling became the catalyst for our Dignity Assurance Program, which has fundamentally transformed our service culture. On the screens behind them, metrics from the program's first 6 months display impressive results. Customer satisfaction ratings up 28% across all demographic groups. Discrimination complaints down 72% company-wide. And employee engagement scores improved 31% following implementation of enhanced training. Anonymous reporting system has identified and addressed 47 potential service disparities before they escalated to formal complaints. These numbers tell an important story, what Eleanor notes. But equally important are the individual experiences that numbers can't capture. The grandmother and grandchild who can enjoy their first flight together without discriminatory treatment. The passenger of color who receives the same warm welcome as everyone else in first class. The traveler who feels valued regardless of appearance or background. She turns to Zoe with evident pride. The future of Horizon Airways isn't just about planes and routes and financial performance. It's about the values that guide every interaction, every decision, every moment of service. My granddaughter reminded us of that fundamental truth, and I've asked her to share her perspective with you tonight. Zoe steps forward, adjusting the microphone with practiced ease. She takes a deep breath before beginning. When I recorded what happened on our flight, I wasn't thinking about changing a company. I was just doing what my teacher taught us, documenting things that don't seem right. But my grandma showed me that when you have evidence of problems, you can fix them in ways that help everyone, not just yourself. Her clear voice carries through the ballroom, capturing the audience's complete attention. The Dignity Assurance Program isn't just for famous people like my grandma. It's for everyone who flies on Horizon planes. Because nobody should feel like they don't belong somewhere just because of how they look. The simplicity and moral clarity of her statement resonates powerfully. Industry veterans with decades of experience nod in appreciation of wisdom delivered through a child's straightforward perspective. Eleanor returns to the podium, placing a gentle hand on her granddaughter's shoulder. The measure of an organization isn't whether problems occur. It's how those problems are addressed when they do. Zoe's courage helped us recognize a gap between our stated values and operational reality. The past 6 months have been dedicated to closing that gap systematically. She advances to the next slide, revealing the company's new initiative, a diverse hiring program specifically targeted at expanding representation across all levels of the organization. Today, I'm pleased to announce the next phase of our commitment. The Future Horizons initiative will provide training and career pathways for underrepresented communities throughout aviation, from flight operations to executive leadership. We're committing $50 million over 5 years to create the most diverse, equitable airline in the industry. The announcement generates enthusiastic applause, particularly from younger employees who recognize the significance of this commitment to structural change. And to ensure we never lose sight of our founding values, Eleanor continues, every new employee, from baggage handlers to board members, will complete dignity assurance training as part of their onboarding. Every performance review will include metrics on equitable treatment and inclusive practices. As the formal presentation concludes, industry leaders approach Eleanor and Zoe to express admiration for how they've handled the aftermath of Flight 923. Several CEOs mentioned that they've implemented similar programs at their own airlines, inspired by Horizon's comprehensive approach. You've changed the conversation across the entire industry, notes the CEO of a major European carrier. We're all examining our service cultures more critically now, looking for the gaps between what we say and what our passengers actually experience. Among the attendees is Michael Ramirez, now Director of Service Culture, following his exemplary work implementing the Dignity Assurance Program. He approaches Eleanor and Zoe with evident appreciation. Dr. Jackson, Zoe, I just wanted to thank you both. What happened 6 months ago could have been just another incident report. Instead, it became the foundation for meaningful change that's improving experiences for both passengers and employees. You were an essential part of that change. Michael, Eleanor acknowledges, your willingness to stand for what's right, even when it wasn't convenient, exemplifies the values Horizon was built upon. As the evening continues, Eleanor notices a familiar face approaching hesitantly from across the room. It's Rebecca Whitfield, looking markedly different from their last encounter, more humble in bearing, though still carrying herself with dignity. Dr. Jackson, she begins, I wasn't sure if I should attend, but I received an invitation. She glances at her name tag, which identifies her as speaker, accountability and service panel. Eleanor nods. I asked Sophia to include you in tomorrow's industry discussion. Your perspective on recognizing and addressing bias in service interactions has value, particularly for those who might see themselves in your former position. Rebecca's expression reflects genuine gratitude. Thank you. The past 6 months have been transformative. The work I'm doing now with the diversity consulting firm, helping other service professionals recognize their own biases, it feels like purpose emerging from mistake. Growth often begins in uncomfortable places, Eleanor observes. Your willingness to transform a significant failure into a learning opportunity speaks well of your character. Later, as the formal event transitions to casual conversation, Eleanor and Zoe share a quiet moment together near the ballroom windows overlooking the San Francisco skyline. You've helped create real change. Sweetheart, Eleanor tells her granddaughter, the metrics are important, but what matters most are the experiences that won't happen now, the discriminatory interactions that have been prevented by our improved systems and training. Zoe considers this thoughtfully. So we helped fix things for people we'll never even meet. Exactly, Eleanor confirms with a warm smile. That's the true measure of meaningful change, not just addressing what happened to us, but preventing similar experiences for countless others. Zoe nods, absorbing this lesson about how individual actions can create systemic impact. I'm proud of us, Grandma. As am I, Eleanor agrees, embracing her granddaughter gently. As am I. 6 months after Flight 923, what began as a discriminatory incident captured on a child's phone has transformed into comprehensive structural change, not just within Horizon Airways but across the aviation industry. The metrics show measurable improvement, but the true impact lies in the experiences that won't happen now, the dignity that will be preserved, the respect that will be extended to all passengers regardless of appearance or background. And perhaps most importantly, a 9-year-old girl has learned that documentation creates accountability. That accountability drives improvement, and that improvement changes lives. A lesson in civic engagement and moral courage that will shape her understanding of citizenship and responsibility for years to come. The story of Eleanor Jackson and her granddaughter Zoe represents far more than an isolated incident of discrimination on a transcontinental flight. It embodies universal truths about dignity, accountability, and the potential for meaningful change when we document injustice and address it systematically rather than individually. What began as a child's simple act of recording unfair treatment transformed into a catalyst for comprehensive improvement, not through anger or vindictiveness, but through strategic patience, documented evidence, and commitment to systemic change rather than mere individual punishment. Eleanor's response demonstrated leadership at its most authentic, acknowledging failure directly, addressing it comprehensively, and using it as an opportunity for growth rather than defensiveness or denial. Her focus on improving systems, rather than simply removing one problematic employee, created lasting change that will benefit countless travelers who will never know the story behind the improvements they experience. For viewers witnessing this story, the message is clear and powerful. Documentation creates accountability. Accountability drives improvement. Improvement changes lives. When we observe discrimination or injustice, recording evidence isn't about seeking revenge or public shaming. It's about creating the foundation for meaningful, lasting change. Remember, sometimes the most powerful response to discrimination isn't immediate revelation of power, but the patient documentation of truth. Your voice matters. Your witness matters. Your courage to document injustice matters, not just for your own vindication, but for the systematic improvements that can prevent others from experiencing similar treatment. Subscribe to Blacktail Stories for more accounts of dignity prevailing over discrimination, of strategic patience creating meaningful change, of individual courage transforming systems rather than merely seeking personal vindication. Because in the end, true power isn't about punishing those who discriminate. It's about building a world where such discrimination becomes increasingly rare and consistently addressed.